welcome to our YouTube channel. Hi guys, tonight we wander together into a different century through narrow, muddy lanes and across silent fields silvered with mist. The air smells of damp straw and wood smoke, and somewhere in the dark, a church bell tolls, once slow and hollow. You are about to walk straight into the heart of a medieval Halloween night, when the line between the living and the dead seems soft enough to brush with your fingertips. You can almost taste the chill of it. Furthermore, you probably won't survive this, at least not without a good blanket and a strong imagination. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I love hearing where you're listening from, so tell me your location and local time in the comments. Now dim the lights, settle into your pillow and let the story begin to breathe. You trudge along the village path, boots squelching through mud that still remembers the last harvest rain. The year is fading. Around you, cottages crouch low, their thatched roofs glistening with dew, and faint orange flickers wink through tiny shuttered windows. You can hear laughter carried on the wind, but it is subdued, half nervous, as if the night itself were listening. In the distance, dogs bark at nothing. Visible cows shuffle uneasily in their stalls. Everyone knows this evening belongs to strange company. In the Middle Ages, people called this season by many names. In Celtic lands it was Machine, marking the end of the harvest and the start of the dark half of the year. Later, when Christianity spread across Europe, the Church renamed it All Hallows' Eve, the night before All Saints' Day. But however it was labeled, the old feeling lingered that tonight the veil between worlds thinned and the dead might walk home. Historians still argue whether this belief was more symbolic or genuinely feared. Yet every villager acted as though the spirits were close enough to overhear their gossip. You pause at a crossroad, that uneasy meeting point where paths, spirits, and fortunes intersect. A crossroads was never just dirt and direction. It was a place of decisions, offerings, and sometimes danger. People whispered that ghosts favored such spots, unable to choose a way forward or back. A small wooden cross stands there now, tied with a wilted bunch of herbs. Someone has left a crust of bread beneath it, an old token for any wandering soul too hungry to move on. It is not superstition, exactly more like courtesy toward those you hope will stay polite in return. A faint glow draws your eyes upward. On the nearest hill, fire begins to bloom. First a thin thread of smoke, then a golden flare. The village bonfire is being lit, a bright defense against whatever unseen things lurk in the cold. Sparks leap high, carried by the wind, each one like a soul rising. The smell of burning oak and peat drifts down to you, mingling with damp earth and sheep wool. You feel the pull of warmth, the instinct that says, stay near others, stay near the light. As you climb toward it, you pass people carrying bundles of sticks, torches, or baskets covered with rough cloth. Everyone moves quickly, quietly. No one wants to be caught between home and hearth after dark. On this particular night, a child clings to her mother's skirt, eyes wide, holding a tiny turnip carved with a rough face. The hollow inside flickers with a stub of candle. The first lanterns, centuries before pumpkins, arrived from faraway lands. The bonfire is large, now a breathing, roaring creature. Men feed it with branches and sparks. Rain over the crowd, shadows leap up walls and faces. Someone begins a slow drum beat with a wooden stick on an overturned barrel. It is not music in the modern sense, but rhythm, deep and steady, like a heart, reminding everyone that they are alive. You step closer, feeling heat on your skin. The warmth loosens shoulders, coaxes out conversation, even laughter. Fear becomes festive when shared. One man tells of a strange light seen over the marsh the night before. A ball of fire that danced above the reeds, a spirit, he claims. Another shakes his head, a trick of gas, though he says it uncertainly because words like gas mean little to him. Historians still puzzle over how medieval people interpreted natural phenomena, but to them everything carried moral or spiritual meaning. A wandering light might be a warning from purgatory or a soul seeking prayers. You realize that in this world even the air breathes intention. Someone passes you a cup of warm ale spiced with cloves. The taste is sharp and comforting. Behind you, an old woman mutters blessings for anyone listening, saints, neighbors, ancestors. She does not discriminate. Her hands, cracked with work, trace a small cross in the air. Later she will scatter ashes from this fire around her doorway to keep sickness away. A mainstream historical fact says such bonfires were common in autumn across medieval Europe. Part celebration, part purification, right, but few written records capture the hum of fear that hid beneath the laughter. From the far side of the crowd comes a different sound, a shriek of playfulness. A group of youths has draped themselves in ragged cloaks, faces smudged with soot. Pretending to be wandering spirits, they chase children who squeal and hide behind skirts. It is harmless fun, though not everyone laughs. One elderly man makes the sign of the cross, muttering that the dead do not like mockery. Yet even he stays to watch, perhaps remembering when he ran through the night doing the same. Above you, the sky deepens into violet and indigo. Stars blink open, shy at first, then bold. The moon rises, swollen and pale. A silent spectator. For a moment, everything feels balanced, the fire and the dark, fear and festivity, death and life. You understand why people keep returning to this ritual, year after year. It gives shape to the unknown. It makes the invisible visible, even if only through flame and story. You step back from the fire, letting the heat fade. The crowd begins to shift, some heading home, others lingering to dance or tell more tales. The night is still young and beyond the hill, more mysteries wait. Songs, masks, charms and secrets whispered to the wind. But for now you simply breathe. The smoke carries a faint sweetness of apples and hay. The ground feels firm beneath your boots. You are here alive, and the world, though full of shadows, is still beautiful. You glance once more at the fire, sparks drift upward, fading into the vast dark like tiny prayers. Tomorrow the ashes will be scattered, the fears tucked away until next year. But tonight, as the flames crackle and laughter mingles with the rustle of wind through the reeds, you sense something ancient, stirring, something older than religion, older than history itself, the human need to face the dark and find light within it. You stand by the fading bonfire, its glow sinking into embers, and your thoughts drift toward where all this began. The celebration feels ancient, older than the village itself, older perhaps than the church bell echoing in the valley. Long before anyone called this night Halloween, farmers and shepherds in the misty hills of Ireland, Scotland and Wales honored something called Shane. It marked the very edge of the year, when summer's labor ended and winter's long hunger began. People of that age did not divide time into months and dates like we do. They felt the shift in the wind, the dying of the grass, the silence of the fields. That was how they knew the year had turned. Samhain was not simply a holiday. It was a threshold, a moment when the world paused between the light and the dark. People believed that during this pause, the barriers between the living and the unseen loosened, the dead could wander home to visit, and unseen beings could slip through cracks in the night. According to early monastic writings, monks who recorded these stories centuries later were both fascinated and nervous about such customs. Some of them described people leaving food at their doors or lighting fires on hilltops to help wander souls find their way. Others tried to explain the practice as heathen folly, though one can sense their secret awe in the ink. You picture yourself in those ancient hills, centuries before your medieval village existed. No church towers, no stone walls, only scattered huts beneath an immense autumn sky. The night stretches endlessly and silence feels alive. A family gathers around a hearth of peat smoke and dim orange flame. They whisper names of ancestors, perhaps asking for their blessing or forgiveness. A pot of grain stew bubbles thick and simple. Someone places a spoonful outside the door as an offering. You can almost smell it, earthy and warm. It is a gesture both practical and tender. If the dead are real, they deserve hospitality. If they are not, no harm is done. Some old chronicles hint that animals were brought near the fire as well. Cattle were driven between twin bonfires so that their smoke would guard them from illness during the winter. It was part ritual, part veterinary measure, though no one would have called it that. Ancient practices often blended faith and practicality until the two became indistinguishable. Archaeologists have found traces of burned animal bones in old pits across Celtic lands, suggesting that feasting and sacrifice intertwined. Whether these were offerings to spirits or simply the remains of a communal meal is still a matter of academic disagreement. The idea of machine did not vanish when Christianity took root. Instead, it quietly adapted, as traditions so often do. By the early Middle Ages, church leaders began encouraging people to replace pagan memorials with holy days for the saints and the souls of the departed. The result was a delicate merger, All Hallows' Eve, the holy, mixed with the haunting devotion mingling with dread. Early sermons from Ireland and northern France show priests warning their congregations not to light fires for the dead but to light candles for the saints. Yet, as one monk dryly noted in his margin notes, the people liked both. The persistence of old beliefs was not just rebellion, it was comfort. Villagers understood the pattern of the year through these customs. When crops were gathered and daylight shrank, they wanted reassurance that life would return. Samhain, and later Halloween, offered that promise. The world might die each winter, but it would be reborn. The dead might leave, but they would not be forgotten. There is something profoundly human in that rhythm, a rhythm still echoing in the way we celebrate seasons. Now, in the dim edge of the village, you watch a group of elders chatting beside a small shrine built into a tree trunk. They speak softly of saints, of good harvests, of lost friends. To one side, a younger man ties a small bundle of grain to a branch, muttering words his grandmother taught him. He calls it a charm of remembrance. The others glance his way but say nothing. In this world, faith and superstition coexist as easily as breathing. You recall one curious anecdote from a Norman scribe who visited Ireland in the 12th century. He claimed that on this night people left the front doors of their homes unbarred, just slightly open, so that ancestral spirits could enter without knocking. He admitted that he found the custom both touching and unsettling. They believe the dead return, he wrote, and they leave warmth for them, as one would for a traveler in frost. Historians of today still discuss whether he exaggerated to amuse his audience or simply described what he saw. The fire on the hill behind you begins to sink lower. The villagers hum an old melody, half prayer, half law. You feel the layers of belief beneath it, the ancient farmers who watched the sky for signs, the monks who wrote by candlelight, trying to reconcile old myths with scripture, and now these medieval peasants who have turned the whole mixture into something living and communal. You crouch down and let the soil crumble between your fingers. It feels damp and cold, but steady. Somewhere deep in the earth are the roots of this night, stretching backward through centuries of story and ritual. The living and the dead share this ground, and in a way you are standing at their meeting point. A gust of wind swirls ashes across your boots, the smell of peat thickens. Someone near you laughs softly, telling a tale of how last year a lost shepherd followed a strange light and found his way home by it. Whether the tale is true or only the product of many retellings hardly matters. Traditions like this are built not on proof but on memory. You look toward the moon, nearly full now, and think of how every culture has marked this same turning of the year with its own mixture of fear and gratitude. In that reflection lies the real endurance of Halloween. It is not merely about ghosts or saints or candy centuries later. It is about learning to greet the darkness and still feel hope, flickering like a candle in the wind. The fire burns lower behind you, and you turn toward the old stone church, crouched at the edge of the village. Its walls glisten with dew, the mortar darkened by centuries of weather and whispered prayers. The wooden door stands open tonight and the faint scent of tallow candles drifts out into the chill air. Bells murmur in the tower, a gentle but steady rhythm meant to reassure the living that this night belongs, officially at least, to God. Yet you can sense the unease beneath the ritual. As you step closer, you notice flickers of movement inside. A few villagers kneel before the altar, heads bowed, murmuring prayers for departed souls. Their voices rise and fall like a soft tide. On the far side, a priest dressed in plain wool rather than fine silk paces slowly, his hands clasped. His face is tired but kind. He knows that once the prayers end, half of those same villagers will slip back into the lanes to light candles for ancestors at home or hang charms by their doors. He will not stop them. Furthermore, he understands that faith cannot erase old customs overnight. In the early Middle Ages, church leaders across Europe were still learning how to tame the ancient rhythms of rural life. Rather than banish the autumn fires and spirit offerings, they tried to reshape them. Some of the earliest papal letters speak of transforming the feasts of the old gods into feasts of the martyrs. The strategy was clever. If you cannot destroy a festival, sanctify it. The Feast of All Saints was fixed for November 1st, and later the Remembrance of All Souls on November 2nd. Together they built a sacred bridge across what used to be a pagan chasm, one surviving. Homily from the 9th century gives a glimpse of this delicate negotiation. The preacher warns his flock against keeping the night of spirits, yet he also urges them to pray for the souls of the faithful departed. His tone wavers between rebuke and empathy. He cannot quite decide if his people are sinning or simply seeking comfort. Modern scholars reading these texts see a blend of frustration and practicality. The Church recognized that fear of the dead could be turned toward mercy for the dead. You imagine how that would sound in your village. The priest might remind his listeners that purgatory needs prayers, not offerings left at crossroads. He might hold up a relic or a wooden cross and speak of saints who protect against the restless dead. Still outside his church walls, fires flicker and laughter drifts on the wind. The faith of the people is wide enough to hold both heaven and hedge spirits at once. A curious anecdote survives from a parish record in England around the 12th century. It tells of a priest who grew angry when he found women tying small wax figures to the church gate. They claimed it kept evil away from their livestock. Instead of punishing them, he blessed the figures and called them images of protection. The story suggests how clergy often adapted rather than opposed. People needed symbols they could touch, and the church learned to offer those symbols in safer forms. Inside the dim church, light trembles across the stone floor. Someone begins to sing a low Latin chant. The melody rises and folds back on itself, hypnotic and ancient. You feel the weight of the space, the thick air, the faint, damp scent of moss, the flicker of gold paint on wooden saints. Outside you hear faint shouts from the hills where others still dance around their fires. The two worlds coexist only yards apart. It would be easy to imagine open conflict between priest and villager, but in truth their relationship is more tangled. Most clergy come from these same towns. Their mothers once lighting charms against the same fears. Theological scholars today still wonder whether the line between Christian and folk ritual ever truly existed or if it was more a matter of language. What one man calls superstition, another calls tradition. You walk past a carved wooden pew and notice scratches on its surface, not just from knives, but deliberate marks, small crosses, circles, a few initials. Perhaps they were carved to pass time, perhaps to bring luck. The wood feels smooth under your fingers. It hums faintly with memory. In many rural churches marks like these survive silent testimonies to ordinary hands shaping faith in their own image. The priest approaches the doorway, his silhouette framed by candlelight. He nods to you, then looks toward the hill where the last orange glow still lingers. Better they gather by light than by darkness, he murmurs half to himself. His words remind you of something recorded by a monk from northern France who traveled among villages each autumn. He wrote that people feared the night less when they faced it together, even under the watch of fire and song. They gather not for sin, he observed, but to remember. It is one of the earliest sympathetic views of popular religion that survives. As the chanting fades, the villagers slowly leave the church. Some cross themselves at the door, others clutch a small handful of holy water to sprinkle on their thresholds. One woman tucks a candle stub into her cloak, whispering that it will burn in her window for her husband lost at sea. Her faith is personal, intimate, a blend of church teaching and private hope. You step out again into the night. The air feels colder now, the stars sharper, smoke drifts low from chimneys. The world outside the church seems both blessed and bewitched. You realize that for these people, the sacred and the haunted are not opposites but reflections of the same truth, life and death, intertwined, faith and fear feeding each other like twins. The bells toll once more, their echoes rolling through the fields. You stand listening until the last note fades into silence. Somewhere in that quiet hum of the medieval night you sense a balance being kept not by theology alone but by human need. The villagers may pray by candlelight and feast by fire, but in both acts they are reaching for the same thing, a little light against the darkness. You leave the church, behind its bells fading into the fog, and walk toward the hills where the bonfires rise again. The glow paints the night in trembling orange, a kind of living heartbeat. Across the darkened countryside each flame flickers like a small sun and the air carries the rich scent of smoke pine and damp grass. You can hear laughter mixed with the crackle of burning wood. This is the heart of the night, the gathering that pulls everyone together. Villagers have carried timber and brush for days, saving the largest logs. For this moment, the bonfire is more than light and warmth. It is protection. People say that fire keeps the wandering souls at bay, the same way it drives wolves from the forest edge. A parchment written by a cleric in the early 13th century notes that country folk kindle their great fires upon the hills, believing their glow to blind the spirits of wickedness. It is both an observation and a hint of disapproval, though one suspects the writer was secretly moved by the sight of it. You draw closer and the air grows thick with heat. Sparks whirl upward, carried by the wind, like tiny stars escaping gravity. Children chase them, laughing until their parents pull them back, warning of burned fingers. The flames make shadows leap across faces, turning every person into a shape of gold and darkness. The sound is soothing in its own wild rhythm, a crack and sigh of burning branches that makes conversation pause and resume like a tide. Someone tosses a bundle of herbs into the flames. It flares green for a second and fills the air with a sharp, ruinous scent. A man near you nods approvingly, saying, "The smoke will keep away sickness in the coming months." An old custom like this survived for centuries. People believe that walking around the fire or passing animals between twin blazes would drive out misfortune. Records from Scotland describe similar rites performed well into the late Middle Ages. The church might frown, but no one risks angering the invisible. You step back as a gust of wind shifts the smoke toward you. It stings your eyes and for a moment shapes seem to form inside it. You think of how many generations have stared into this same brightness, seeing not only fire but stories. A curious entry from a Welsh chronicler claims that villagers could read omens in the sparks, each direction of flight, foretelling good or bad fortune. Whether that was ever truly believed or simply a tale to pass the time, no one can prove. The night hides its own truths. The bonfire becomes a stage. Young men leap across its edge to prove courage, while girls toss nuts into the flames, watching to see whether they burn steadily or burst apart. The way the nuts behave is said to reveal the strength of a sweetheart's love. Even the priest, who spoke so sternly earlier in the evening, smiles faintly when he sees this game. He pretends not to notice. After all, people need their small hopes. Someone begins to sing a local ballad, the kind passed down from grandmother to granddaughter. The words are about the harvest, but the tune carries something older, something that hums of twilight and the sea. A few others join in and soon the song blends with the sigh of the fire, until it is impossible to tell which sound began first. Music has always been a kind of magic, a way of steadying the heart when the world turns strange. As the night deepens, more fires appear on distant hills. From your vantage point you can see them dotting the horizon like stars fallen to earth. A traveler might think the land itself was alight. In parts of Ireland, old poems describe how each community's blaze was a signal to the next, a chain of light across the countryside. One medieval account even hints that people carried embers home from these fires to reignite their own hearths, symbolizing the renewal of life for another year. Some historians suspect this detail was exaggerated by later writers, but the image lingers because it feels true. You move closer again, warming your hands. The surrounding faces are soft with tired joy. Someone pours cider into wooden cups, passing them down the line. The drink tastes of apples and smoke. For a moment you feel part of something timeless. This same fire has burned for countless generations, in one form or another, across fields, villages and even city courtyards. An old man tells a story of a year when the fire refused to catch. The people grew frightened, thinking the dead had claimed the night for themselves. He laughs as he tells it, but his eyes glint in the light, and you sense the memory still unsettles him. Legends often live in that uneasy space between humor and fear. Perhaps it was only wet wood that night, or perhaps it was something more mysterious, no record can say. You notice a circle of villagers tossing handfuls of grain into the fire while murmuring short blessings. The sound is rhythmic and soft, almost like rain. The practice, one fragment of an agricultural blessing, was meant to ensure next year's crops. A Latin note in a 14th-century manuscript remarks, "They offer the first seed to the flame, calling it the spirit of the field." Whether that spirit was once a god or merely a metaphor for fertility, no one knows. Traditions, like embers, shift shape but stay warm. Around midnight the flames begin to calm. People drift away, leaving glowing mounds to smolder under the stars. The night air cools fast. Smoke hugs the ground curling through the grass. A few stragglers stay behind, talking quietly about ancestors and fortunes. You sit for a while feeling the warmth fade against your skin. It is peaceful in a way that feels sacred. The fire, the songs, the laughter, they are always to make sense of fear. When you finally rise to leave, your clothes carry the scent of smoke and wood resin. You glance back once, watching the last sparks rise into the black sky, each one disappearing like a prayer answered softly. Tomorrow, the ashes will be scattered over the fields, blessing the earth for another cycle. The people will call it custom, the priest will call it purification. You might simply call it hope written in flame. The fire light fades behind you as you follow a trail that winds through the lower fields. The air feels heavier here, cool and damp, carrying the smell of cut hay and distant smoke. The moonlight pools in the furrows like silver water and your breath clouds in front of you, in the dark. Ahead you hear faint footsteps and laughter. Someone is coming. A group of villagers emerges from the shadows, faces half hidden beneath crude masks. One has a hollowed turnip with slits for eyes strapped over his head, the candlelight inside flickering like something alive. Another wears a sheet smeared with soot, pretending to be a ghost. The smallest of them jingles a bell and carries a stick tipped with a skull made of clay. It is not meant to frighten but to amuse. Yet in the shifting moonlight the effect is both funny and unsettling. This is the hour for disguises. The people call it goosing, a word as old as the hills. They believe that if spirits wander tonight, the best way to escape harm is to blend in with them. Masks confuse the dead. Who cannot tell friend from phantom? The practice appears in fragments of medieval writings across Britain and Ireland. One account from a monastery near York mentions villagers dressing as souls of the departed and begging for food. The tone of the scribe suggests equal parts disapproval and fascination. You fall in with the group. As they make their way between cottages, the glow of torches lights their path. The children dart ahead, knocking on doors, calling out in singing voices. Home after home greets them with laughter and small offerings of bread or apples. The grown-ups call these gifts tokens for safety, and each one is a quiet prayer disguised as generosity. A man with a mask of woven straw jokes that he feels freer this way, unrecognized, his laughter is muffled through the reeds. In the Middle Ages, a mask was more than decoration. It was transformation. To wear another face was to step briefly outside one's own identity, to mock fear itself. Folklorists who study these old customs still discuss whether such disguises began as playful mimicry or as genuine magical defense. The truth probably lies somewhere between. As the night deepens, the mischief grows bolder. Two boys switch the sign outside the ale house, turning it upside down. Another group fills a widow's water pail with leaves. The mischief is harmless, though. One villager mutters that every prank invites a spirit's attention. In some regions it was said that those who caused too much trouble might find their doors marked with soot by dawn. No one can explain who does the marking. A curious story survives from the town of Perth in Scotland. Written in the margin of a civic record, it describes a spirit play performed each All Hallows Eve, where masked villagers acted out the meeting of the living and the dead. The performance ended with a mock chase through the streets, followed by laughter and feasting. It reads like both carnival and exorcism. Some historians interpret this as an early form of theater, others as ritual meant to protect the town. No one fully agrees. You stop before a cottage where a woman stands in the doorway smiling at the geysers. She hands each child a small cake marked with a cross. The cakes are rich with nutmeg and honey. As you take one, you notice her eyes flicking toward the shadows behind you. Keep your faces hidden till midnight, she warns softly. Her voice carries the rhythm of old wisdom. Whether the warning is meant for ghosts or for mischief makers, you cannot tell. The masks make the group seem unreal, as if the spirits truly have borrowed human voices for a night. When one man laughs, the sound is strange, coming from the hollow face of a painted demon. Another villager wears a costume made of old cloth, patches and bird feathers. Calling himself the Wandering Crow, he claims that those who mock the spirits keep them from growing jealous. His explanation might be nonsense, but the superstition has its logic. Fear becomes tolerable when turned into theater. Across the lane someone beats a drum slowly, just enough to echo through the fog. The sound makes the masks sway in rhythm. For a moment the laughter quiets and everyone feels the thin edge of something ancient brushing through the night. The disguises no longer feel silly but sacred in their own way, part of an unspoken pact between the living and whatever else listens in the dark. An old chronicle from Flanders mentions that travelers passing through villages on All Hallows Eve often mistook the masked groups for actual processions of the dead. The writer described them as faces without eyes and laughter without joy. He meant it as a warning, but his words carry poetry. Centuries later, the echo of those masks would survive in our own customs of dressing up for Halloween, though few remember their original purpose. You continue walking with the geysers as they head toward the open square. Someone lights a fresh torch and the flames leap high, scattering shadows. The masks glow for a moment like living paintings. The air smells of smoke and crushed apples. The noise rises again, laughter, songs, footsteps. It is chaotic, but it feels alive, vibrant, with shared fear turned into joy. When midnight draws near, the group begins to disperse. Masks come off, revealing tired, soot-streaked faces beneath. The transformation ends as quietly as it began. The people exchange smiles that say more than words. They have faced the unknown together and come home safe. You glance at the masks piled by the fire, their hollow eyes staring upward. They will sleep now until next year, waiting for the night when they are needed again. You linger for a moment listening to the silence returning. Between houses, the laughter fades, the last torch flickers out. Only the scent of smoke and apples remains. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hoots, a reminder that not everything hiding in the dark is friendly or known. You take a slow breath, feeling the weight of the night settle again. In every culture, it seems, people learn to survive fear by wearing it on their faces and laughing beneath it. The laughter of the geysers fades behind you as you follow a narrow track out toward the fields. Mist curls low over the grass, hiding the edges of stone walls and ditches. The moon hangs above, pale and sharp, lighting your breath as you walk. It is quieter here, away from the music and the bonfires. The silence feels heavier, as though the land itself is listening. This is the time when people say the dead travel home. The villagers call them the walkers, spirits returning to visit the places they once loved. The lanes leading between churchyard and village are known as the spirit roads. No one dares block them or build across them, not even the wealthiest lord. A document from a 13th century estate mentions that a barn was moved because it troubled the path of souls. It sounds like superstition, yet in the medieval mind such respect for the unseen was common sense. You pause by a gate, looking down the path ahead. The air feels colder here, damp against your skin. Somewhere beyond the hedges an owl calls its cry long and low. The villagers believe owls carry messages from the other world. It is not always a bad omen. Sometimes the call means that a loved one's spirit has found rest. Old field notes collected centuries later in Wales mentioned families leaving a candle burning near the window so that visiting souls could see their way back. The candle smoke was said to drift in the direction the spirit had come from. A faint light waver at the far end of the path for a heartbeat. You think it is someone walking with a lantern, but then it fades and reappears in a different place. A trick of the fog perhaps? Or what people used to call a willow, the wisp. The peasants explain such lights as the glow of wandering souls seeking peace or sometimes the flame of a buried treasure guarded by the dead. A modern scholar once suggested these lights came from gases in the bogs. But the people of the Middle Ages had no need for chemistry, they already had stories. You walk slowly, feeling the damp grass clutch at your boots. The spirit road cuts straight through the fields toward the churchyard. The villagers say the dead prefer straight paths because they cannot turn corners easily. You smile at the thought but find yourself keeping to the edge of the path. All the same, belief shapes behavior, even when we claim not to share it. At a small bridge over a stream, you find an old woman waiting, wrapped in a dark shawl. She nods politely and drops crumbs into the water, whispering names as she does so. When she notices you, she explains that the crumbs are for souls who drowned or died far from home. They find their way back by the sound of water, she says. Her tone is gentle, not fearful. It is her way of caring for the unseen. Accounts from Ireland describe similar customs, people offering food or light at crossroads, bridges and streams to help to wander spirits rest. The church tried to forbid such gestures, but many priests quietly tolerated them. You cross the bridge and follow the road until the outline of the church appears through the mist. Its small graveyard lies behind low stone walls. Candles glimmer between the headstones, each one placed by someone remembering a name. The air here smells of wax and damp grass. A few villagers stand silently, some praying, others only watching the flames. It is not mourning exactly. It feels more like conversation, the living and the dead speaking across a narrow distance. A local legend says that if you walk the spirit road at midnight without fear, you might hear the voices of those who passed away that year. Some say they whisper your name as a blessing. Others claim they call you to join them. No record proves such tales, but they continue to be told. Wherever autumn nights grow long, there is comfort in believing that love does not end with breath. You kneel beside one of the candles. The flame bends in the wind almost going out, then steadies again. It throws just enough light to read the inscription on the nearest stone. The name has worn away, the letters softened by centuries of rain. Someone has left a small sprig of rosemary there. You know that rosemary is for remembrance, a symbol used even in church rites. Whether the hand that placed it followed faith or folklore, the act feels pure. From the direction of the fields, faint music drifts toward you, the echo of distant pipes. The living are still celebrating, but here the night is slower, quieter. It feels suspended between worlds. You imagine the souls walking the spirit roads, now drawn by the warmth of home. Some enter through unlatched doors to rest beside the hearth for a moment, invisible but near. Others linger by the thresholds, content just to see familiar faces. In some regions of Europe, people placed chairs by the fire and left bread and milk on the table for these ghostly guests. Chronicles from Normandy mentioned families whispering, "Sit and be comforted," before going to bed. Whether or not the spirits ever came, the gesture itself speaks of compassion. The living comfort themselves by comforting the dead. You rise and turn back toward the village. The mist begins to thin, revealing faint silhouettes of cottages and the faint red glow of hearths behind you. The candles in the graveyard flicker like a constellation. It is easy to see why this night still captures imagination centuries later. It is not about horror, but about connection. The medieval mind did not separate life and death the way we do. They shared the same world, different rooms in the same house. As you walk, the path seems softer underfoot, as though the earth remembers every footstep ever taken upon it. You feel the strange calm that follows fear, the sense that being aware of the dead makes life itself more vivid. Somewhere in the distance, another candle is lit, another prayer whispered, another crumb dropped into water. The night belongs to everyone, visible and unseen. By the time you reach the village, the mist is lifting, the stars shine brighter and the fires burn lower. You glance once over your shoulder at the path, half expecting to see movement there. There is nothing, only the shimmer of moonlight on wet grass. Still, you whisper a quiet good night to whatever might be listening, because in this world courtesy extends beyond the living. By the time you return to the village square, the fires have burned down to soft beds of ash. The air feels warmer now, thick with the scent of baked bread, honey, and smoke. From the open doors of cottages comes the sound of clinking dishes and gentle laughter. This is the hour for sharing food, and tonight the table is not set for the living alone. You step inside a low house where lamplight flickers against the walls. A round loaf sits cooling on the wooden table. Its top is marked with a small cross and beside it rests a bowl of apples and nuts. The woman of the house smiles when she sees you looking for the souls. She explains softly, breaking the loaf in two, she hands you a piece, still warm from the oven. The flavor is sweet and spiced with cloves. The villagers call these little loaves soul cakes. Records from the 14th century mention this custom in England and parts of Ireland, when people baked small round cakes on All Hallows' Eve to give to the poor in exchange for prayers. A simple rhyme survived into later centuries: a soul cake, a soul cake. Have mercy on all Christian souls for a soul cake. Though the rhyme belongs to later memory, it captures the same feeling. Each cake is a quiet bridge between the living and the departed. Children and beggars move from house to house carrying baskets and singing for the dead. Their voices rise through the mist high and bright. Some call this fowling a kind of spiritual trade. The giver earns a prayer, the receiver earns a blessing. It may seem transactional, yet it binds the village together. In a world where life is fragile and winters are long, a shared ritual of remembrance is more than kindness, it is survival. A curious detail appears in a parish account from Shropshire describing how Solar sometimes wore small bells on their wrists to keep the dark company away. It is a sound you can almost imagine, tiny, hopeful chimes echoing through lanes lined with thatched roofs. The church encouraged the custom because it turned superstition into charity. But the villagers never quite forgot its older meaning. The cakes were not only for Christian souls, they were for all souls. You watch a child hold out his hand for a cake. His face glows with fire. Light crumbs already dusting his chin. Behind him, an old man mutters a blessing for the dead of his family, for my wife, for my brother. He whispers as if, speaking through time, the house fills with warmth that feels deeper than heat. Everyone eats, laughs, and remembers. This is not mourning, but communion. Outside, more groups of singers pass by. Their voices blend into a patchwork of tunes. The air hums with them. Someone nearby plays a small pipe and the rhythm of footsteps on the packed earth sounds like a heartbeat beneath it all. You step out and follow them for a while, letting the music pull you through the dark. In one corner of the village, a few travelers sit beside a fire of their own. They are strangers passing through on the way to another town. A villager approaches and offers them cakes as well. The eldest traveler accepts with gratitude, pressing a coin into her hand. "For your ghosts and mine," he says. The phrase feels old, older than either religion or superstition. Every traveler carries memories behind them like invisible company. Chroniclers of the age noted that this night blurred the lines between giving to the poor and feeding the dead. To feed one was to bless the other. The act made the unseen world feel closer, kinder. Some believed that every soul cake given and every prayer spoken shortened the time a loved one spent in purgatory. Others thought it simply brought good fortune for the year ahead. The reasoning mattered less than the shared hope behind it. As the night stretches toward its quiet hours, you pass another cottage where a family sits together in silence. A single candle burns in the center of the table, beside an untouched plate of bread. No one speaks. The candle flame trembles each time the door opens, as though acknowledging something unseen. "The father notices your glance and nods for my mother," he says quietly. It is all the explanation you need. Scholars examining household records from the period find that this kind of private offering was nearly universal, from peasant huts to noble halls. It served as both remembrance and reassurance. To eat together, even symbolically, with the dead reaffirmed the continuity of family. The custom persists in echoes even now, in candles lit for loved ones or empty chairs kept at festive tables. The human heart keeps finding ways to remember. A gentle rain begins to fall soft as breath, the smell of baking and smoke mingles with the scent of wet earth. You walk through it slowly, passing houses where flickering candlelight glows through the cracks in shutters. In some windows, small loaves still cool on the sill, in others only shadows move. The whole village seems wrapped in a hush of peace and memory. At the far edge of the square, the priest stands under the eaves watching the solar pass. He looks weary but content. You catch the faint trace of a smile as he whispers, to no one in particular. "If love brings the dead to our door, then let it." His words hang in the damp air like a benediction. The night feels gentler now, the darkness less absolute. You think of all the loaves baked tonight, all the prayers whispered, all the names spoken softly into the smoky air. Somewhere, perhaps the souls they were meant for drift close enough to listen. The living may never know for sure, but maybe certainty is not what matters. The ritual itself, the giving and the remembering, is enough to keep the world stitched together for another year. The rain eases before dawn, leaving the village washed in mist and quiet. You walk through the narrow lanes, hearing only the soft drip of water from thatched roofs and the faint hiss of cooling hearths. Most people have gone to bed, but a few shapes still move in doorways, setting small charms in place before sleep. It is the hour when the last bits of courage are gathered, when those who believe in protection whisper their final words to the night. You stop beside a cottage where a woman presses a rowan branch above her door frame. The red berries gleam faintly in the candlelight. She notices you watching and smiles, keeps the restless ones out. She says simply, "Rowan, or mountain ash, was one of the most trusted charms in medieval folklore. People believed its scarlet berries frightened away evil spirits and its wood was sometimes carried in pockets or carved into small crosses." Chronicles from the Scottish Highlands mention shepherds weaving rowan into their belts on All Hallows' Eve to protect their flocks from night wanderers. The habit crossed borders easily because it worked as comfort even when faith faltered. You move on and find a man fastening a horseshoe to the wall beside his window. He hammers it with quiet precision, making sure the curve faces upward to catch good luck. The sound of each strike rings through the wet air. In church writings, priests occasionally mocked such habits, calling them charms of the foolish. Yet even some clergy carried iron pins in their sleeves against unseen harm. Iron was believed to offend spirits, a superstition that lingered long after its reason was forgotten. Archaeologists have even uncovered iron knives buried under doorways in medieval houses, likely placed there to cut through bad fortune. Farther along the road, a small child scatters salt across the doorstep. The grains glint faintly in the candlelight. Her grandmother whispers a rhyme about counting the salt before bed, so the dead cannot cross the threshold. It is half law, half warning. Little rituals like these fill the edges with the night. Invisible but deeply human, they create a sense of order against whatever chaos might be drifting just beyond sight. Inside another house, you hear someone murmuring a prayer. The words mix Latin phrases with the local tongue, a blend of sacred and familiar. It begins like a church blessing but ends more like a spell light within shadow without peace on this house. Folklorists who later studied these recitations found that most were improvised, part religion, part instinct. People shaped words into armor, believing that sound itself could guard the soul. A chronicler from Normandy recorded that on All Hallows' Eve, families sometimes tied threads of red wool around the legs of beds to keep the sleepers safe from nightmares. Another source mentions that windows were covered not just to keep out cold air but to stop wandering spirits from peering in. These small defenses reveal how tangible fear could be in the medieval imagination. Yet they also show tenderness. Protection was an act of care, not paranoia. You glance toward the churchyard at the edge of the village. A faint glow still lingers there, the remnants of candles left burning for the dead. A young man stands by the gate tossing herbs into the damp grass. When you ask what he's doing, he explains that it is sage for cleansing, so the tired souls can rest easy. His gesture is both humble and brave. He believes he can offer peace to forces unseen, and that belief gives him peace in return. In the center of the square, a few people have gathered around the dying embers of the main fire. They talk in low voices about the charms they prefer. One swears by carrying a sprig of grow in her pocket. Another insists that turning your coat inside out can fool a ghost into losing its way. A third says he once threw a handful of earth from a grave over his shoulder to break a curse. Each tale is met with nods rather than laughter. In a world ruled by chance and weather, any comfort is worth keeping. Not every charm is made of objects. Some are gestures, a simple act of crossing oneself before walking through the woods, or spitting on the ground to ward off envy, even those who barely attend. Church performs such movements automatically, as if guided by memory older than faith. Historians today still debate whether these gestures originated in pre-Christian rites or grew out of later superstition. The answer hardly matters to the people performing them. What matters is the sense of control they offer against the unpredictable. As you listen, an old man recounts a curious story. He says that when he was a boy, his mother told him to place his shoes by the bed. With their toes pointing toward the door, spirits entering would be confused, unable to tell if someone was coming or going, and would move on. The crowd laughs gently, yet no one mocks. The old man nods, smiling, as if the story itself is its own kind of charm. The night deepens until only a few glowing coals remain in the square. The people scatter back to their homes, their voices fading one by one. The village feels hushed, but not empty. You can almost sense all those hidden protections working together, the iron, the salt, the rowan, the whispered words. It is a quiet network of care stretching across the darkness. You stand a while longer breathing the cold air. The stars above shimmer faintly through thinning clouds. For a moment you imagine seeing the world as a medieval villager did. Every breeze might carry blessing or danger. Every sound might be a message. It is not a world of ignorance but one of intimacy. Nature, faith and fear are woven tightly together. When you finally head back to your lodging, your boots splash through puddles that glisten like melted silver. The village sleeps now guarded by the humble faith of charms. Somewhere inside each home, people dream under the protection of salt and iron prayers and hope. Whatever ghosts wander outside, they find no welcome here tonight, only kindness wrapped in caution. The air grows colder as the hours drift toward midnight. The village has fallen into a deep hush, broken only by the rustle of wind through the hedges and the soft going of cattle from distant barns. You follow the sound, drawn by curiosity and by the faint glow of a lantern swinging near a stable door. Inside, the smell of hay and warm breath greets you. A farmer stands among his animals, speaking softly to them as though they could understand. He notices you and smiles. "Best to keep them calm," he says, patting the flank of a cow. Spirits unsettle beasts quicker than men. The notion seems odd to a modern mind, but for medieval people it was common wisdom that animals sensed what humans could not. Chronicles from Yorkshire describe horses refusing to leave their stalls on All Hallows Eve, their eyes rolling white at unseen shapes. The farmers took it as a warning that something walked the lanes that night. A cat slinks across the hay, its fur glossy black under the lantern light. The farmer follows its movement wearily. "Best leave that one be," he mutters. "It sees more than we do." Cats, especially black ones, carried complicated reputations in medieval law. In some places they were thought to bring luck, keeping away vermin and bad spirits. In others, they were seen as witches, familiars, or even transformed souls paying penance. A curious entry in a 12th century bestiary calls the cat both holy for its watchfulness and cursed for its midnight eyes. People have never fully agreed on what to make of a creature that sees too much. A hen clucks nervously from the corner. The farmer crosses himself, murmuring a small prayer. He explains that if a rooster crows between midnight and dawn on this night, it means the spirits are wandering too close. A folk belief from Brittany claimed that when the crowed early, the dead were driven back to their graves. It is easy to imagine how comforting that sound must have been. In the darkness, even the smallest creatures became guardians in their own way. You step closer to the door and look out across the fields. The mist moves like slow water over the ground. Somewhere far off you hear the faint bark of a dog. In medieval thought, dogs occupied a strange middle space between the holy and the haunted. They were companions of the living but also believed to follow souls along the spirit roads. A scholar once noted that village records often mention dogs whining or howling at midnight during All Hallows Eve, taken as signs of invisible processions. Some claimed these animals could see the dead walking, others insisted they only sensed storms. The truth was less important than the comfort of believing the animals were watchmen over both worlds. The farmer tells you of an old custom he still keeps. Each year, before locking the barn, he leaves a handful of oats in a small wooden bowl for the wandering beasts. He means the spectral animals said to roam with the souls of the dead. According to an old tale told in northern England, the souls of mistreated animals were given one night each year to find kindness. Whether anyone believed the story completely is unclear, but gestures like his kept it alive. You brush your hand against the mane of one of the horses. Its body is warm, the coat smooth beneath your palm. It snorts softly and turns its head toward you, eyes glimmering in the lamplight. There is something grounding about its presence. In a world filled with superstition, animals provide a kind of honesty. They respond to tone, to touch, to the energy of the moment. Perhaps that is why people trusted their instincts so much. The farmer chuckles and tells another tale, one passed down from his grandfather. Once a crow perched on our roof the whole night. He says, wouldn't move, not even when we threw stones. My mother said it carried a soul too heavy to fly. The image stays with you. Crows and ravens have long been symbols of mystery, often associated with prophecy. A Norman poet wrote that to see a raven at dawn after All Hallows Eve meant a spirit had safely crossed back to its resting place. Whether bird or omen, it gave meaning to the morning light. The animals grow restless for a moment. As a gust of wind rattles the shutters, the cat arches its back, the horses stamp and snort. The farmer sets down his lantern and hums softly, a low tune with no clear melody. It calms them and you too feel the tension ease. Music, even this simple hum, has power here. It bridges fear with familiarity. Keeping the night gentle, you help the farmer close the door, leaving just a crack for air. The interior glows softly, the lantern swaying from its hook. Before you leave, he sprinkles a few drops of blessed water along the threshold, a habit he learned from his father. No harm in asking heaven's eye to watch, he says. Such small actions show how seamlessly faith and folklore coexist. No one sees contradiction in blessing a barn and tying Rowan at the same door. Both mean safety. Outside again, the fields shimmer with dew, a faint trail of smoke rises from the village beyond and the moon glows through thinning clouds. You walk a short distance before turning back to glance at the barn. Through the gap in the door, a soft golden light still shines. The animals inside are quiet now, their breathing slow and steady. It strikes you how these nightly gestures, feeding a stray cat, whispering to a horse, leaving a bowl of oats, speak to a tenderness deeper than fear. Medieval life was harsh, but compassion found its way into even the smallest corners. People looked at the animals around them and saw companions in the struggle against the long dark. Perhaps that is why so many stories from this time begin and end with creatures who listen better than men. The wind shifts, carrying the faint scent of wet hay and wood smoke. You pull your cloak tighter and head back toward the square, feeling oddly comforted. Behind you, the barn cars softly, as if sighing into sleep. The animals rest, the charms hold, and the night goes on, neither wicked nor kind, simply alive. By now the night has settled into a deep and velvety stillness. The last echoes of laughter from the square fade into the fog, and only the soft murmur of wind and the distant trickle of water remain. You follow the scent of roasted meat and fresh bread toward one of the larger cottages on the edge of the village. Its windows glow faintly and smoke rises from the chimney in a slow spiral. Inside you find a feast still waiting for anyone awake enough to enjoy it. The warmth is immediate, wrapping around you like a blanket. A family sits at a long wooden table, the surface crowded with trenches, apples, bowls of nuts and a jug of ale. Yet there is something unusual here. One extra place has been set, complete with plate and cup, though no one sits there. A single candle burns beside it, its flame bending gently toward the empty chair. The father notices your gaze and nods with quiet reverence for those who come home tonight. He says this act, setting a place for unseen guests, was common throughout medieval Europe. In Ireland and Wales people called it the meal of the dead. It was both an offering and an invitation, a sign of hospitality toward ancestors believed to visit on All Hallows' Eve. Church records from the 12th century mention priests urging families to replace these superstitious suppers with prayers instead. But even the clergy knew better than to ban them outright. The tradition was too deeply woven into the rhythms of home. You take a seat beside the hearth and watch as the family begins to eat. The room fills with the sounds of chewing and quiet conversation, the soft clink of pottery and the crackle of logs. The mother ladles stew into wooden bowls and steam rises carrying the scent of onions and barley. Each person eats slowly, as if mindful of who might be sharing the air with them. From time to time they glance toward the empty chair and the candle flickers in response, as if listening. An entry from a medieval household account in Burgundy describes similar scenes. It tells of families leaving bits of meat and bread on plates overnight that the souls may taste and bless the house. Whether anyone truly believed the dead consumed the food or simply touched its essence is uncertain. Later scholars have compared this to older pagan offerings for household spirits. The line between honoring ancestors and feeding ghosts was never clearly drawn. After the meal, the family gathers closer to the fire. The youngest child climbs into her mother's lap, her eyelids heavy with sleep. The father takes a jug of cider and pours a little into a shallow bowl by the hearth for travelers, he says softly. It is not clear whether he means travelers of flesh or spirit, but his tone suggests it does not matter. To share warmth is to keep fear away. The fire burns low, glowing red at its center. The father begins to tell a story, one that his own father told him. It is about a man who forgot to leave a light burning for his ancestors, one All Hallows' Eve. That night his house grew colder and colder until he heard knocking on the window. When he opened the shutter, he saw no faces, only the shapes of hands pressed against the frost. The next morning he found a single candle on his doorstep still burning. He never forgot again. The family listens, their faces lit by the orange glow. Each expression, a mix of awe and comfort. You sip from a cup offered to you, the drink, warm with cinnamon. Outside, the wind sighs against the shutters. Somewhere beyond, a dog barks once and then quiets. The candle beside the empty chair flickers but does not go out. The mood in the room feels balanced between joy and sanity, as if everyone understands they are sharing time with both the living and the remembered. A traveler's account from the Rhineland mentions that families who set a place for the dead also sprinkled flour in front of the hearth to see if any footprints appeared overnight. If small marks were found in the morning, they took it as a blessing. If nothing showed, they said the spirits had found rest. It is difficult to know whether such tales were meant to be believed or simply cherished as comfort. Faith, after all, is made from the spaces between certainty and hope. When the family finally rises, they do not clear the table completely. The bread and cider are left beside the candle which will burn until dawn. The father gently opens the door for a moment to let the night air in. He bows his head, murmuring something you cannot quite hear. It sounds like a greeting and a farewell at once. Then he closes the door, sealing warmth and peace within. As you step outside, the mist has thinned and the stars gleam faintly overhead. From house to house you can see the same soft glow of candles through cracks in shutters. Each one marks another family, keeping faith with memory. Across Europe, the pattern repeats itself: quiet homes, small lights, and a belief that love crosses any boundary, even the one between life and death. The night no longer feels haunted, but hushed like a great collective breath. The living rest. The departed are remembered, and the boundary between them feels tender rather than terrifying. You realize that, for all the talk of ghosts and spirits, the true purpose of these feasts is gratitude, the medieval heart surrounded by hardship and loss. Learn to give thanks by remembering you. Take a final look at the cottage behind you. The candle still burns by the empty chair, steady as a heartbeat. Its glow seeps through the window, touching the fog with gold. You imagine invisible guests pausing for a moment at the doorway before fading back into the night, warmed by bread, song, and the love that summoned them home. Outside the cottages, the fog begins to thin, revealing the outline of the village square. The bonfire has burned low to a bed of glowing embers. A few figures remain there, laughing quietly. Their faces orange in the fading light. You walk closer, drawn by the sound of cheerful voices and the faint music of a small harp. This is the playful part of the night, when fear softens into fun and curiosity replaces caution. A woman seated by the fire reaches into a wooden basket and pulls out a bright red apple. She holds it up and grins. "Let us see what fortune the water brings," she says. The others cheer softly and someone fetches a shallow tub filled with water. They set it before the fire, the surface shimmering in the flickering light. The game is simple: bite the apple without using hands. It is harder than it looks, and soon everyone is laughing as faces plunge and splash. This playful scene hides a deeper meaning. Fortune-telling games like these were common on Halloween night in medieval Britain and Ireland. Chronicles written by monks mention that young people used apples, nuts, and candles to test the paths of love and destiny. The clergy disapproved, calling them trifles of vanity, but the people continued anyway. Even in a world governed by faith, curiosity about the future could not be silenced. One young man, his hair dripping with water, lifts his apple in triumph. The crowd claps and someone jokes that it means his sweetheart will be true. In parts of Scotland people believe that if an apple floated toward you, your future spouse was thinking of you at that very moment. Such ideas sound quaint now. Yet they reflect how closely medieval life tied hope and superstition together. Every action carried meaning, even laughter. Next, the villagers bring out a small mirror and a single candle. A girl sits before it, cheeks flushed with both warmth and nerves. If I look without blinking, she whispers, I will see his face. The flame wavers and the others fall silent. She stares into the glass for a long moment before gasping softly and covering her eyes. I saw something. She says, though, whether truth or imagination, no one can say. People around her nod knowingly. Best not speak of it. An older woman advises, the vision fades if named. The belief that one could glimpse a future lover in a mirror or in the reflection of water appears in several medieval poems and ballads. One particularly old verse from Ireland tells of a girl who gazed into a well on Halloween night and saw the shadow of the man she would marry. Scholars still debate whether such tales originated from earlier pagan divination rituals or were purely romantic inventions of the later Middle Ages. Whatever their origin, they lingered in the popular imagination for centuries. An old man by the fire suggests another test. He tosses 2 nuts into the embers, naming them for a courting couple. If the nuts burn together, love will last. If they crack apart, the pair is doomed to drift away. The crowd leans forward, watching the flames with the same intensity others might give to scripture. The nuts sputter, pop and then settle close together, glowing quietly side by side. A cheer rises and the old man laughs. See, even the fire blesses them, he says. Some researchers who study folklore have noted that these simple games offered more than entertainment. They gave people permission to express feelings in a world where marriage was often a matter of arrangement rather than affection. Under the cover of superstition, laughter, and a bit of cider, young villagers could flirt without scandal. The rituals of play became a language of their own. Nearby, a woman places a handful of apple peels into a bowl of water and spins them with a stick. The letters formed by the floating peels are said to reveal the initials of one's true love. She squints, then laughs aloud when she sees something that might resemble an M. Martin the Miller. Someone teases and everyone bursts out laughing again. The teasing is gentle, the kind that builds closeness rather than shame. Through it all, the fire glows brighter, as if feeding on the energy of the crowd. Sparks drift upward and vanish into the sky. The smell of wet earth mixes with the sweet scent of apples. The warmth on your face feels comforting, almost hypnotic. Around you, the line between divination and celebration blurs. These people are not calling on dark forces, but on the playful side of fate, seeking reassurance that tomorrow will hold love and light. One girl tosses a handful of barley into the flames and whispers a wish. The grains spark and hiss before disappearing. So the spirits know what to send. She explains it is not fear that moves her, but hope. Even the smallest act feels connected to the larger rhythm of the year, the dying harvest, the coming winter, the endless turn of loss and renewal. As the night deepens, the games slow. Some wander away arm in arm, others stay by the fire, humming old tunes. The laughter grows softer, melting into the gentle crackle of burning wood. You watch the reflections of the flames in the puddles at your feet, each ripple stretching and bending the light. The world feels dreamy, caught between memory and possibility. In the end, what survives of this night is not just the food or the fire, but the way people use both to face uncertainty. When life is harsh and the future unpredictable, a little magic, even in play, becomes necessary. It turns fear into a question instead of a curse, and perhaps that, more than anything, is what keeps people gathering around the fire year after year, to ask the night for a glimpse of hope and to laugh no matter what it answers. The laughter of the apple games fades into the misty dark, and you find yourself drawn toward the edge of the village again. The air has grown cooler, almost brittle, and a thin veil of smoke still drifts over the fields. Somewhere ahead, a burst of shouting breaks the quiet, followed by a ripple of laughter. It sounds mischievous, not cruel. You walk toward it, guided by the rhythmic thud of running feet on packed earth. A group of youths charges down the lane carrying torches that flare wildly in the wind. Faces smeared with ash and soot flash in the flickering light. They wear patched cloaks turned inside out, a gesture said to confuse spirits, but also to hide their identities from the people they intend to tease. A boy holds a sack full of apples and bread rolls, trophies from earlier raids. When he spots you, he grins like a devil carved in wood. These are the tricksters of All Hallows' Eve, heirs to an older spirit of misrule that surfaces when the year turns cold. Medieval life, so full of rules and ranks, needed its moments of rebellion. This night provided one for a few hours. Servants mocked masters, children scolded their elders, and the quiet villagers who bowed to the church on Sunday let themselves run wild. Documents from late medieval England mention these night roughs who banged on doors, switched livestock between stalls and occasionally borrowed wagon wheels just to leave them in trees. The chroniclers describe the behavior with alarm, but their words cannot hide a certain admiration. The crowd passes a cottage, shouting playful insults through the shuttered window. Inside, someone tosses out a crust of bread, pretending to appease them. The group cheers, leaving the offering untouched. The act is ritual more than robbery, a kind of game that everyone understands. The young test the patience of the old, and the old pretend outrage for the sake of custom. One boy swings a torch and cries, "For the wandering souls." Another answers, "And for our own mischief." The words mingle in the smoke. Some historians think these shouts came from older processions, meant to drive out spirits or to mark the turning of the year. Over time, piety turned to play. Yet the echo of those ancient rites still lingers in the rhythm of their running and the roar of their laughter. A girl in the group carries a small drum and taps it with a stick, setting a rough beat. The others begin to chant nonsense rhymes, half song, half taunt. You recognize fragments of prayer mixed with pure invention. Saints keep the gate, ghosts guard the door. They sing and we shall beg till we beg no more. The sound is oddly beautiful, rising and falling in time with their steps. The group stops near the churchyard wall. One boy dares another to touch the gate, and when he does, the others howl with mock fear. The bravest leaps over the fence, touches a gravestone and sprints back. Everyone applauds, though one older woman watching from a doorway crosses herself quickly. She knows too well that play with the dead can invite attention, not easily dismissed. A curious note appears in a legal record from Norwich in the 15th century describing young folk of the parish fined for placing carved turnip heads along the road to frighten travelers. The entry was probably written with frustration, yet it captures the same energy you see here, harmless defiance dressed as ceremony. In a world where night and superstition ruled so much of daily life, laughter itself could be an act of courage. The tricksters tire eventually and gather in the square again. Someone produces a jug of cider, and they pass it around, gulping between jokes. The torches burn lower, their smoke turning blue. They begin to recount their exploits, swapping the innkeeper's sign, scattering hay in the priest's yard, turning a plow upside down in a field. None of it causes real harm. It is rebellion measured in mud and laughter. Sociologists studying these old customs centuries later have suggested that such mischief acted as a release valve for tension. The feudal order left little room for expression. For one night, the powerless could play at being powerful, and the laughter that followed served as renewal rather than destruction. The next morning everyone returned to their roles with lighter hearts. It was balance by inversion. You watch as one youth climbs onto a barrel and delivers a mock sermon to the others, mimicking the priest's Latin phrases while mixing in barnyard jokes. The crowd laughs so hard they nearly fall over. The humor feels innocent, not blasphemous. Even the saints, they believe, can forgive a little laughter on a night meant to blur the boundaries between worlds. As the moon climbs higher, the group grows quieter. The cider has warmed their blood and softened their rebellion. They begin to sing again, this time slower, a tune about harvest and homecoming. The sound echoes through the empty lanes, low and wistful. When the song ends, they scatter like smoke, disappearing into doorways or fading down paths that glimmer with dew. You stand alone for a while, the silence after their laughter ringing in your ears. The air smells of torch smoke and crushed grass. A single lantern burns in the distance, marking the way back to the square. The trickster's energy still lingers, electric and alive, proof that even in an age bound by faith and fear, the human heart needed moments to play, to break rules gently and to feel free. The embers of rebellion smolder long after the fires die. As you walk back through the quiet streets, you can almost sense the ghosts of laughter drifting above the rooftops, as if the night itself is smiling at its own mischief in the stillness. It is easy to believe that joy, like fear, has its own kind of magic. The echoes of laughter fade into the cool air as the village settles again into stillness. You wander toward the small square near the church, where the poorest villages usually gather. The cobblestones glisten with dew and the faint light of dawn lingers just beyond the horizon. Here the night takes on a quieter mood. The wild play gives way to prayer and giving, and the festival's gentler side begins to reveal itself. A group of beggars sits huddled near the steps of the chapel, wrapped in rough cloaks, their hands outstretched toward anyone passing by. A few children approach them carrying baskets. Inside are small loaves of bread, pieces of cheese and bits of fruit. The children place the food gently in their palms, whispering blessings before hurrying away. One of the beggars bows his head, murmuring, "May your dead sleep peacefully." The words hang in the cold morning air, both prayer and exchange. This custom, the giving of food to the poor in remembrance of the dead, was deeply rooted in medieval life. It was known as almsgiving for souls, and it carried the weight of both faith and fear. In a society where salvation was uncertain and purgatory loomed large, every act of charity became a spiritual investment. Chronicles from the 13th century record that people were urged to give generously on All Hallows' Eve so that the holy poor may speak kindly of their souls before God. You watch as more villagers appear bringing warm broth and blankets. The scene is humble, but the reverence in their movements makes it almost ceremonial. A widow kneels beside an old man, adjusting his cloak so it covers his shoulders. "For my husband's rest," she murmurs. The poor in turn promise to pray for her husband's soul. Each gesture links the living and the departed in a fragile but beautiful chain. A cleric's diary from that era tells of parishioners who left coins in the hands of beggars as though they were saints in disguise. Whether literal belief or poetic kindness, the sentiment shows a world where spiritual economy and compassion intertwined. Giving was not just duty, it was communication with heaven. You sit beside the steps and listen to the quiet exchange of voices. The smell of broth mingles with the faint incense drifting from the church door. A few candles still burn inside, their light spilling out onto the stones. It glows against the faces of the poor, turning their expressions tender, almost serene, for one night each year. They are not invisible. They are the bridge between the fearful living and the forgiving dead. One young boy, barefoot and shivering, receives a small loaf marked with a cross. He bites into it hungrily, then pauses to whisper a name. When you ask whose name it is, he smiles and says, "For my mother. She visits in my dreams." His voice is simple, untroubled. He believes what he says without hesitation. The comfort of that belief warms the cold space around him. There is a story told by a chronicler from Flanders about a village where the poor were invited to sit at the same table as the wealthy on All Hallows' Eve. The host declared, "If we share bread with the hungry, the angels will share rest with our dead." Whether or not the event truly happened, the tale spread across Europe as an example of perfect charity. Even nobles who could not bring themselves to dine with peasants sometimes left coins at church doors, hoping the gesture alone might count in the ledgers of heaven. You look around and notice that everyone here moves quietly, almost solemnly. The chaos of mischief and laughter has been replaced by something gentler. The flicker of torches reflects in puddles, making the ground look like rippling bronze. From time to time, someone kneels to murmur the names of their ancestors, as if each name were a candle itself. The sound is soothing, like a prayer woven into the rhythm of breathing. In a corner, a priest stands with his hood pulled low. He does not stop the giving or interrupt the whispered prayers. Instead, he blesses each basket that passes, his Latin phrases blending with the local tongue. A later historian who studied church sermons from this period noted how many priests quietly supported these customs despite official warnings from above. To them, acts of kindness, however superstitious, were better than indifference. You notice an elderly woman lighting a small lamp and placing it beside the poorest man in the group. The flame trembles but stays steady. She explains softly that the lamp will guide any lost souls who follow him tonight, so they may find warmth too. It is an odd but touching logic. The poor who live closest to suffering are seen as companions to the wandering dead. As the first hint of dawn touches the horizon, a pale glow spreads across the church tower. The bells begin to chime again, not loud and fearful like before, but soft, almost drowsy. The sound rolls through the mist and lingers in the heart. The beggars rise slowly, bowing to the villagers who helped them. Some tuck pieces of bread into their satchels, others simply cross themselves before leaving their silhouettes fade into the morning light. You remain seated for a moment longer, watching smoke curl from chimneys as the village awakens. The festival is nearly over, but the feeling of connection still hums quietly in the air. The night has been wild and solemn, holy and human all at once. Here, at its end, you realize the essence of it all. Behind every candle prank and charm lies the same truth, a longing to belong not just to the living world, but to the endless thread of memory that ties all souls together. As the sun finally rises, the last candles burn low and wink out. The scent of bread lingers, warm and sweet, the smell of kindness made tangible. For a moment, the whole village feels like a prayer answered. The first light of morning glimmers faintly over the thatched roofs, but the night still clings to the hollows of the land. You step beyond the last cottages following a narrow track that winds into the marshes. Mist hangs low, hiding the pools and reeds. The ground squelches beneath your boots, cold water seeping up through the soil. The air smells of peat iron and something faintly sweet like rotting apples. It is here, far from firelight, that the stories of the restless dead live strongest. You pause on a small rise and look out over the flat expanse. Tiny sparks of light shimmer across the surface of the bog. They move with a nearly grace, flickering, vanishing, then reappearing farther off. To your eyes they might be fireflies or tricks of the mist, but to the medieval villagers who walked these same paths they were messages from the spirit world. These floating glows were called Miller-the-Wisps, and their presence was both fascinating and terrifying. A monk writing in the 12th century described them as souls denied rest, condemned to wander where the living fear to tread. In his version, the lights belonged to those who had been greedy or deceitful in life, forever seeking the gold they once hoarded. Later, a folktale from Ireland claimed the lights were the lanterns of a blacksmith named Jack, doomed to roam the earth after tricking both the devil and God. People said he carried a coal from hell inside a hollow turnip to light his path, a detail that would one day evolve into the Jack-o'-lantern. We know you watch the faint glimmers dance over the reeds and think about how such stories must have grown. Imagine a farmer returning late from the fields, his lantern gone out, seeing lights ahead that seem to lead him home. He follows, only to find himself lost in the fog. In that confusion, belief takes root. The marsh itself becomes alive with meaning. A parish record from the south of England tells of villagers warning travelers never to chase the lights, claiming that those who did were led to their deaths. In the bogs, one man supposedly escaped by turning his coat inside out, breaking the spell of the spirits. Whether true or not, such tales reveal how the landscape shaped the imagination. Nature's danger was explained not by weather or terrain, but by willful, unseen beings. The ground here feels soft, unstable, as though it remembers every step taken upon it. Somewhere nearby, water gurgles through a channel, echoing like distant laughter. You can almost understand why people thought the marsh was alive. Every sound, every flicker of light carried intention. Even silence seemed to breathe. A shepherd once told a visiting cleric that the lights were not damned souls but the breath of angels guiding lost spirits to heaven. The cleric wrote down his words with surprising respect, noting that the idea seemed gentle and worthy. Not all superstition was met with scorn. Sometimes faith and folklore merged so seamlessly that they became indistinguishable. As you move deeper into the marsh, the lights grow closer. They hover at knee height, pale and steady, now reflected in the water like stars caught beneath the surface. You stand very still, listening to the soft hiss of the wind through reeds. For a moment you feel the strange calm that comes when fear turns to wonder. The night is no longer hostile, but vast and alive. A toad croaks somewhere nearby, breaking the spell. You laugh quietly to yourself. It is easy to see how stories grow in the dark. Each sound becomes a clue, each shadow an omen. Historians who study medieval folklore often remark that these tales served a purpose beyond entertainment. They taught people caution and respect for the natural world. The Will-o'-the-Wisp was not just a ghost story. It was a lesson to stay on safe ground. Still, you cannot deny the beauty of it. The lights sway like dancers, their reflections rippling across the black water. Perhaps the villagers were right to treat them with reverence. Every mystery invites awe before it invites explanation. In one corner of the marsh you find a small wooden cross half buried in the mud. Someone long ago must have placed it there, perhaps for a lost traveler or a drowned animal. The wood is weathered smooth by rain. You trace your fingers over it and whisper a silent greeting to whoever it honors. In that simple act, you find yourself repeating what countless others have done, meeting the unknown with a gesture of care. The mist thickens again as you turn back toward the village. The lights seem to follow for a while, then fade slowly into the fog behind you. The marsh resumes its quiet breathing. You realize that to the medieval mind, such moments were not superstition but experience. They felt the world watching back, and in that awareness they found both humility and comfort. By the time you reach the first hedge, rose dawn's pale glow has begun to stretch across the horizon, the birds awaking their calls sharp and bright against the soft hum of the earth. You glance once more over your shoulder at the marsh, now just a blur of gray water and reeds the willow. The wisps are gone, their light absorbed by morning, yet the feeling they left behind lingers, a reminder that mystery does not vanish with daylight. It simply changes shape. You walk on your boots, leaving wet prints that fade behind you. The road ahead leads back to warmth and laughter, but part of you remains with those quiet lights in the fog. Their dance, both warning and promise. To see them, was to glimpse the fragile beauty of belief itself flickering just long enough to keep the dark from feeling empty. The mist drifts back toward the hills as morning gives way to pale light, and you hear a faint hum from the square. It begins as a low murmur, then swells into melody. Following the sound, you find the villagers gathered once more around the remains of the bonfire. The ashes still glow faintly, sending curls of smoke into the air. Someone has brought out a drum, another a small harp, and a young boy blows softly on a reed flute. The night's chaos has faded, replaced by a slower rhythm that sounds almost like prayer. Music fills the cool air. It is not loud or grand, but steady, pulsing with the same quiet heartbeat as the earth beneath your feet. The tune winds upward, simple at first, then layered with harmony as more voices join in. An old woman hums a countermine that sounds older than the church beside her. You realize this is not just entertainment, it is ritual. The villagers play and sing to greet the new day, to smooth the seam between the living and the dead that was opened during the night. A chronicler from the 13th century once described this kind of music as a bridge of sound between worlds. He wrote that villagers in England and France would sing through the night of All Hallows' Eve so that the dead might hear familiar voices and find comfort before returning to their graves. The idea that song could calm spirits is found across many cultures, and it suited a time when few distinctions existed between worship and superstition. You settle near the fire's edge, listening as the tune grows richer. The flute weaves around, the drum beat like wind through branches, the harp adds brightness, and soon the people begin to clap softly. In time, the melody circles again and again, hypnotic like the turning of the seasons. It carries no words now, only the sigh of breath and the steady thump of rhythm. Then a man begins to sing, his voice, rough but heartfelt. He sings of harvest fields, of travelers returning, of loved ones who wait by the door. His verses wander between gratitude and longing, between laughter and loss. The others join in for the refrain, repeating it until the sound fills the square. You notice that even the priest, who had frowned at the mischief earlier, hums quietly along. It is impossible to resist music that feels like warmth itself. A curious reference in a collection of Breton folk songs describes similar gatherings where villagers sang to keep the night kind. Scholars believe these were adaptations of much older pagan chants meant to honor nature's cycles. Over centuries the lyrics softened into songs of faith and friendship, losing their edge but keeping their soul. The church might not have approved of their origins, but it tolerated their effect, a calm and grateful people by morning. As the tune fades, a group of children takes up wooden sticks and begins tapping them together in rhythm. It becomes a dance, small feet stomping softly in the ash. The sound is cheerful, but its pattern carries a strange symmetry, like something learned long ago and never forgotten. One elder murmurs that her grandmother taught her the same steps when she was a girl. For luck when the harvest ends. Perhaps she does not know that she repeats gestures once made to honor forgotten gods of the field. The meaning has shifted, but the motion endures. The music changes again. A slow, haunting tune rises from the harp. It sounds like wind over water, like memory turned to sound. A woman's voice joins in high and clear, singing words that might be Latin or might just be sound. The effect is mesmerizing. People close their eyes, swaying gently. You feel your heartbeat slowing to match the rhythm. It is as if the entire village breathes together. One traveler who passed through Yorkshire in the 14th century wrote of hearing such music and said it was neither holy nor profane, but something between a sound. To make peace with the air. That is what you hear now. A peacemaking song, both lullaby and farewell. It wraps the long night in gentleness, sealing it closed. The villagers begin to disperse, some returning to their homes, others lingering to talk softly. The musicians remain playing for themselves. Now you stay a while longer watching how sound transforms the space. Even the ashes seem to pulse in time, glowing brighter each time the drum strikes. It is easy to imagine that somewhere beyond sight, the spirits listen, too, soothed by the rhythm of human gratitude. Before you leave, one of the musicians looks up at you and smiles. He gestures for you to take the drum and try. You strike it once, feeling the vibration travel through your hands and into your chest. The sound is deep, grounding. For a moment you understand why this night ends in music. Words fade, but rhythm remains. It is the language of heartbeat, of life continuing. As you set the drum down, the tune softens into silence. Smoke rises from the ashes, drifting into the pale sky. The first birds of morning call from the hedges. The world feels quiet again, yet full of something unseen and good. The villagers leave in small groups, humming the refrain to themselves. You walk away with the sound still echoing in your head. It follows you through the fields like a gentle spirit, fading only when you reach the path that leads to the open countryside. Behind you, the last chord fades and the village rests. The music, like the night, has done its work, turning fear into harmony, darkness into something that can sing. The music drifts behind you as you wander down the path leading away from the square. The early light has softened, the mist into gold, but in the corners of the fields shadows still cling stubbornly. Somewhere a rooster crows, though the sound feels uncertain, as if testing the strength of the day. Yet beneath the peace of morning lies a quiet tension. People whisper of witches, of those who work charms too strong or too strange. You pass two women speaking near a well, their buckets resting at their feet. Their voices are low but urgent. One crosses herself as the other leans closer. She was seen near the woods last night. The first woman says, and the milk turned sour before sunrise. The story needs no further explanation. Every village has a figure like her, the midwife, the healer, the woman who knows herbs too well. Sometimes she is loved, sometimes feared. Always she stands just outside the circle of comfort. A monk, writing in the late 12th century, described these women as wise and dangerous. He noted that villagers sought their help for illness or heartbreak, then blamed them when misfortune struck. In times of fear, wisdom could look suspicious. A healer's garden filled with dried plants and bottles might resemble a witch's den to anyone who preferred simple answers. You can almost see her now, an older woman with hair the color of ash moving through the dawn mist with a bundle of herbs over her shoulder. The woman by the well lowers her voice further. They say she walks the woods on All Hallows' Eve to gather power from the spirits. The second woman frowns. Or perhaps she simply gathers mushrooms? The two exchange uneasy smiles, torn between fear and common sense. That is the strange pull of superstition. It explains everything but never fully satisfies. You follow the road toward the forest's edge, curious. The trees rise tall and close together, their trunks slick with dew. A faint smell of earth and mint drifts on the air. Somewhere in the undergrowth a twig snaps. Then she appears, half hidden among the ferns. She does not look like the stories describe her. Her face is calm eyes, clear movements, deliberate. In her hand she carries a bundle of plants, sage, yarrow and wild garlic, the ingredients for healing, not harm. She nods to you without fear. You're out early, she says, her voice steady. She explains that she gathers herbs when the sun is still low, because the dew keeps the spirit in the leaf. To her this is knowledge, not witchcraft. She dries the herbs for ficuses and teas, trades them for bread or wool. Yet she knows that when a cow falls ill or a storm ruins a crop, whispers will turn her craft into curse. Records from ecclesiastical courts show that such women were rarely accused outright in this era. The witch trials would come much later, but suspicion was already forming. A scholar of medieval medicine once noted that midwives often held both power and danger in the eyes of their neighbors. They delivered life, but worked too near the mysteries of blood and death for comfort. In a night filled with spirits and omens, their skill could seem too close to magic. The woman offers you a sprig of rosemary for protection, she says. Even the priest keeps one. Her words carry no irony. To her, the boundary between sacred and natural is meaningless. The earth itself is holy, and its gifts are meant to be used, she tells you. She leaves small offerings at the roots of trees, breadcrumbs or bits of honey, not as worship but as gratitude. Everything we take must be thanked, she says simply. In a nearby hollow lies her cottage, small and crooked, smoke curling from its chimney, dried herbs hang from the rafters, their scents mingling, lavender, chamomile rue. On a shelf rests a wooden bowl filled with water and floating petals. The surface ripples slightly, catching the morning light. She stirs it with a twig to see whether tomorrow brings sickness or calm, she murmurs. When you ask how she can tell, she shrugs. The water knows. You remember reading that some chroniclers described this kind of practice as harmless folk physic, while others condemned it as diabolic. It depended on who was watching. To one mind she is healer and protector. To another she caught forbidden forces. The truth, as always, lives somewhere between fear and faith. Outside her door, she ties bundles of herbs with red thread and hangs them beside a small cross. This keeps both saints and spirits content, she says with a faint smile. It is a phrase that could have been spoken by anyone in this age. Medieval people did not see contradiction in blending prayers with old charms. Life was too fragile to risk choosing only one kind of protection. Before you leave, she presses a small cache into your hand. It smells of sage and salt. Keep it close, she says. It wards off envy and nightmare. You thank her, though you cannot tell whether she offers faith, medicine or something in between. As you walk away, you glance back and see her standing in the doorway, outlined against the faint smoke of her hearth. She looks neither saint nor sorceress, just a woman who has learned how to live in a world filled with uncertainty. When you reach the open path again, you realize how her presence fits. The season All Hallows' Eve belongs to those who move between worlds, priests and tricksters, mourners and healers. The village might whisper about her, but when the next illness comes or a child's fever rises, they will seek her help again. Fear may flare for a night, but gratitude lasts through winter. The breeze carries the faint scent of her herbs. As you walk, it mingles with the distant smoke from village fires, creating something strangely comforting in this place. Magic is not evil or holy, it is simply part of the air everyone breathes. The healer fades into her forest and you continue down the road. Her gift warm in your pocket, the line between faith and wonder softer than ever. The air thickens again as twilight falls, a deep indigo slowly swallowing the color from the land. You follow the sound of bells from the church tower, slow and deliberate, each note echoing across the fields like the heartbeat of the village. The people have gathered once more, this time in silence. The laughter of the night is gone. What remains is reverence. The churchyard lies open, its gate creaking softly as you push it aside. Candles flicker among the gravestones, their flames bending in the cold wind. The villagers move carefully between them, placing small offerings of bread or flowers on the graves of kin. A faint smell of tallow and damp earth fills the air. The ground glows like a field of stars and the bells continue steady as breath. Inside the church, a handful of monks chant in Latin, their voices weaving through the stone arches like smoke. The sound is haunting, yet beautiful, low and endless. The villagers kneel in the pews, murmuring their own prayers in softer voices. Some clutch rosaries, others simply fold their hands. This is the vigil for souls when heaven feels near enough to touch. An account written by a Benedictine abbot in the 12th century describes how, on this night, bells were rung from sunset until dawn to comfort wandering spirits. The tolling was thought to remind them of home and to guide them toward peace. Each note, he wrote, is a hand extended toward the lost. It is easy to imagine how the sound, rolling through fog and darkness, became both comfort and warning. You walk slowly through the churchyard, careful not to disturb the candles. The names on the stones are weathered, some half vanished, others still sharp, as if carved. Yesterday at one grave, a woman kneels with her shawl drawn tightly around her shoulders. She whispers the same prayer again and again, lips barely moving. You catch fragments. Rest light, forgive the candle. Before her flickers violently, then steadies, she smiles faintly and stands, leaving behind a sprig of rosemary. A chronicler from York once recorded a curious belief held by villagers that on this night the dead rose briefly to stand beside their graves when the bells began to ring. The story was told not as horror but as hope. Families claimed to feel a presence beside them in the dark, a sense of someone watching kindly. Even skeptics, the chronicler admitted, found it difficult to dismiss the feeling when the air itself seemed to stir with unseen movement. The priest steps outside his cloak, trailing behind him, and blesses the graves with a spring rig of holy water. Droplets sparkle in the candlelight before falling to the ground. His voice trembles slightly with age. Yet the words flow with certainty for the souls that walk, he says, and for the living who remember. The villagers cross themselves, their faces calm. There is no fear here, only recognition of the inevitable closeness between the two worlds. You stop beside an older stone carved with a small image of a harp. Someone has placed a crust of bread at its base, now soaked with dew. It reminds you of the earlier feasts, the soul cakes, the shared belief that food and prayer can feed what memory cannot. Perhaps this, more than doctrine, is what keeps the custom alive, the simple act of caring for what can no longer be seen. A gust of wind moves through the graveyard and the candles sway. Shadows ripple across the stones like waves for a heartbeat. You imagine shapes moving between the graves, pale outlines that seem to pause, then drift away. You blink and they are gone. The bells continue unhurried, as if nothing unusual has happened. Whether it was imagination or something older, the moment leaves the air heavy with meaning. In the corner of the yard, a few boys linger, daring one another to stay until midnight. One claims that the tombs open then and that the spirits kneel in the moonlight to pray. He insists he saw it once, though he might only be repeating a tale told by his grandmother. Every generation adds a layer to the same mystery, turning it into both warning and wonder. From the open door of the church drifts a scent of incense mixed with smoke. The chanting continues, joined now by a few trembling voices of villagers who know the words by heart. It is a strange harmony, rough but sincere. The combined sound fills the air like a soft tide, washing over the graves, the grass, the stone walls and finally spilling into the night beyond. Somewhere in that sound lies the essence of the festival, fear transformed into beauty, remembrance turned into peace. The medieval mind found solace not in denying death but in keeping it close enough to speak to the candles, the bells, the prayers. They are not defenses but invitations. The living and the dead meet halfway, if only for one night. As the final bell tolls, the priest lowers his hand and the villagers begin to leave the candles burn low, their flames shrinking until only small dots of light remain. You stay behind a little longer, watching the last wisp of incense curl upward and fade into the sky. The silence that follows is not empty but full, as if the air itself hums with gratitude. You turn toward the gate, feeling the damp grass beneath your boots. Behind you, the church stands quiet, its tower dark, against the dim horizon. Somewhere within those stones, the last echo of the bells lingers like a whisper. You carry the sound with you as you step back into the night, reminded that every prayer, no matter how small, keeps the world from feeling entirely alone. The night grows gentler as you leave the churchyard behind. The mist has thinned and moonlight glides along the rooftops, silvering the thatch and glinting off the puddles in the road. You can hear faint music, again, this time different from the simple tunes of the village. It carries a rhythm both graceful and measured, touched with elegance. Following the sound, you notice the glow of torches from the direction of the manor house that overlooks the fields. The manor stands like a sleeping giant, its tall windows spilling warm light across the lawn. Servants hurry in and out of the great hall, their arms laden with platters. The air smells of roasted meat, cloves and mulled wine. Inside, laughter rises beneath the vacked beams. Rich and confident, the peasants. Fires have died down, but here the night still glitters in noble households. All Hallows' Eve takes a different shape. The festival remains one of remembrance, but it is wrapped in luxury and theater. The guests wear masks of silk and gilded leather, their garments bright with embroidery. Instead of ash and soot, they paint their faces with pale powder, claiming it honors the spirits of the departed. Perhaps it does, though the spirits might not recognize themselves in such splendor. A scribe from the 14th century recorded that noble families often held masquerades on this night. The gatherings mixed prayer with performance, guests moving between laughter and sanity. At some point during the feast, the lord of the house would rise to toast the ancestors, naming them aloud before the servants dimmed the torches. The gesture was meant to invite the dead to witness the meal. Though the church frowned upon such blending of faith and entertainment, it tolerated it, knowing that even grandeur could cloak devotion. You stand near the doorway watching the scene unfold. A long table stretches down the hall, heavy with food, roasted goose, glazed apples, spiced bread, wheels of cheese, candles drip wax. Down iron stands filling the air with the scent of honey. The flickering light makes the gold embroidery on the tablecloth shimmer like stars. At the head of the table sits the lady of the manor, her dark gown trimmed with fur. She lifts her goblet and says softly to the souls who built our home and those who will follow us, her words hush the laughter. For a heartbeat. Everyone drinks and for a moment the hall feels still, almost holy. Then the music begins again, and the spell breaks gently. From the corner, a group of musicians strikes up a tune on lute pipe and small drum. The rhythm is lively but polite, meant for dancing rather than wildness. A pair of masked dancers glides into the open space, their movements graceful, their gestures exaggerated. One wears the face of a jester, the other a ghost, painted in white. The performance tells a story, a fool courting death, only to find her gentle. The audience watches rapt, torn between laughter and melancholy. A note in the household account of a noble family in Normandy mentions paying a troupe of performers each All Hallows' Eve to play the Dance of Shadows. The description fits what you see here. The medieval elite enjoyed their reminders of mortality wrapped in elegance. To dance with death was fashionable, not fearful. It showed piety and courage at once. After the performance, servants bring out bowls of sweet custard flavored with saffron. The lady of the house insists that each guest take a spoonful for good fortune. She dips hers first, murmuring a blessing for the household and for the souls of the departed. The guests echo her words, some sincerely, others through polite habit. The sound of silver spoons against pottery fills the hall like gentle rain. You notice a tapestry hanging behind the table, its threads depicting saints driving away demons. But tucked into one corner is an older figure, half hidden, with antlers sprouting from his brow. It must have belonged to an earlier generation, when Christian and pagan imagery mingled freely. Perhaps no one notices him anymore, or perhaps they leave him there on purpose, an unspoken reminder of the past that still breathes beneath their prayers. Outside the great windows, the countryside lies dark and quiet. The servants close the shutters to keep the warmth in, but before they do you catch a glimpse of the village far below. A single light glows there, a cottage candle left for the dead. The contrast between the golden hall and that distant, solitary flame is striking. Yet in their own ways, both fires burn for the same reason, remembrance. A traveler's letter from that era describes attending such a feast and being surprised by the tenderness that occasionally broke through the grandeur. Even the proudest lord, he wrote, speaks softly when naming his dead. The more people have, the more they fear losing it. The festival reminds them that wealth offers no defense against time. When the dancing ends, the guests remove their masks. Faces shine with sweat and wine. The lady thanks the musicians and instructs the servants to carry trays of leftovers to the gate, where villagers waiting outside will receive them. It is a gesture of generosity, half custom, half conscience. The poor will carry the food home, murmuring blessings for the house in return. The circle between rich and poor, living and dead closes again. You step out into the cold night air. Behind you, the music fades as the great doors shut. The stars have come out fully now and the village lights below look small but steady. For all their differences, noble and peasant share the same rhythm of fear and gratitude, the same need to reach across the darkness toward memory. The wind rustles through the grass as you walk back downhill. The laughter from the hall lingers faintly in the distance. Bright and fragile, like the last spark before embers cool, you imagine that even the spirits might pause to listen, amused by the living who still try to honor them with song and candlelight. And as you move through the quiet, you realize that every fire, whether on a hill or in a noble's hall, is lit by the same hope, that warmth, once kindled, might never truly fade. The road grows steeper as you climb back toward the heart of the village. The air is sharp now, clear enough that you can smell the wood smoke drifting from every chimney. A pale moon hangs above the church steeple, washing the stones with silver light. The village is quieter than before, yet not asleep. In the square, people have begun to gather again, carrying lanterns and small relics wrapped in cloth. The bells begin to toll once more, but this time the rhythm is solemn, not fearful. Tonight marks the transition from All Hallows' Eve into All Saints' Day. The priests have prepared for hours, arranging candles and relics to bless the homes of the faithful. The church door stands open, and you can see the flicker of gold within the relics, small fragments of bone, cloth or stone said to belong to holy Men and women rest upon the altar, glowing softly in the candlelight. Villagers approach one by one, kneeling before them. Their faces reflect both awe and affection, as if greeting beloved guardians who have returned for a visit. A monk writing from Canterbury around the year 1100 described such scenes with tenderness. He wrote that relics were the bones of memory, tangible bridges between heaven and earth. To touch one was to brush against eternity, if only for a breath. In his words, the saints lend us their courage for a single night so we may walk without fear. That feeling hums in the air now, stronger than any sermon. The priest moves slowly through the aisle, holding a censer that spills clouds of fragrant smoke. The air fills with the scent of frankincense. Sweet and dry. Children cough softly and their mothers hush them. The smoke curls upward, catching the candlelight like ribbons of silk. He lifts a jeweled reliquary, its glass sides gleaming, and carries it toward the door. The crowd outside bows their heads as he steps into the open air. A woman beside you whispers, "Saint Margaret walks with us tonight?" You follow her gaze to the relic in the priest's hands, a small fragment of bone said to come from the saint's arm. Whether the story is true no one can say, but belief has its own power. The relic passes from hand to hand, each person touching it briefly before crossing themselves. In that touch lies centuries of faith, fear and gratitude. As the procession moves through the streets, the villagers hold their lanterns high. The light dances on the walls, making the narrow lanes shimmer. The chant of the monks floats above the sound of footsteps. Rhythmic and soothing. The melody is old, perhaps older than anyone remembers. It rises and falls like the tide, reminding everyone that faith too moves in waves. A chronicler from Cologne once recorded that on this night people believed saints walked unseen beside them. They carried torches of invisible flame lighting the path for lost souls returning to heaven. The villagers here seem to share that belief. No one hurries, no one laughs. Even the children walk in silence, their eyes wide with wonder. The flicker of candlelight catches the edges of tears on more than one face. When the procession reaches the crossroads at the edge of the village, the priest halts. He raises the reliquary high and speaks, "A blessing for travelers, for the poor and for those who died far from home." The villagers murmur their responses, voices soft but united. It is a moment of grace heavy with meaning. The relic gleams faintly in the moonlight, as though it answers in kind. A curious note from an Italian pilgrim who visited England in the 13th century mentions that villagers sometimes mixed fragments of saints' relics with old pagan charms, tying them together in little pouches for protection. To modern minds that might sound contradictory, yet to them, it made perfect sense. All holiness, whether ancient or new, was part of the same fabric of safety. The boundary between sacred and superstition was thinner than parchment. When the blessing ends, the priest returns toward the church, the relic held close to his chest. The villagers follow for a while, then slowly drift back to their homes. You remain a moment longer at the crossroads where a small lantern has been left burning beside a carved wooden cross. Its flame trembles in the wind but never goes out. Perhaps someone placed it there for a loved one who died on a distant road. The gesture feels private, yet shared by all who pass. The night deepens again, but now the darkness feels kind. The mingled scents of wax, smoke and frankincense linger in the air. You look back toward the church and see its windows shining softly, like eyes still open in prayer inside. The relics will rest until morning, their presence believed to guard the village from misfortune. As you walk away, you think of how faith moves through time, changing shape, absorbing old customs, gathering strength from every hand that touches it. The relics may be small, but they carry the weight of countless hopes. Perhaps that is their true power, not the miracles they promise, but the unity they create, a village breathing as one, bound by memory and light. You reached the edge of the square and stopped to look back one last time. The bells have gone silent, now, replaced by the faint rustle of wind. Through the trees, the lanterns flicker along the road, guiding people home. Above them, the stars glow like relics of their own, each one a reminder that light, once kindled, can travel endlessly through darkness. The stars stretch wide above you as the procession ends and the night becomes still. Once again, the faint tolling of the bells fades into the hills. You take the path west, following the road that winds toward the far edges of the countryside. Here the accents shift, the songs change their melody, and every valley seems to hold its own version of this holy night. The spirit of Halloween, though shared, carries different colors from one region to another. In the highlands of Ireland, the people still call it famine, and the fires burn long after midnight. On the cliffs above the sea, villagers light torches and walk in circles, their voices raised in old songs that sound like the wind itself. A chronicler who traveled through Older in the 13th century described seeing rings of flame dancing upon the headlands, as if the earth itself rejoiced in its own ending. There are the old ways never fully vanished. Even the most devout Christian might still whisper to the ancestors before saying his prayers. The Scottish celebrations carry their own flavor, fierce and joyful. You imagine a village perched beside a dark loch, its cottages bright with torchlight. People gather outside playing pipes and beating drums. The air smells of peat smoke and roasted grain. Children run between the fires carrying hollowed turnips carved into faces, their laughter sharp against the wind. The elders watch with a mix of fondness and caution. They know the night is playful, but they also know it is powerful. The border between laughter and reverence remains thin. A poem recorded in Gaelic centuries later preserves a verse from these gatherings: "The veil thins, the hearth burns bright. Keep bread and kindness through the night." Its simplicity holds everything: the hope for warmth, the fear of what lies unseen, and the gratitude that the living can still sing. Scholars who study such fragments note that regional customs often blurred the line between religion and story. One village might bless its fires in the name of the saints, while another invoked unnamed spirits of the land. Both meant the same thing: protection, peace, and renewal. Crossing the border into Wales, the festival takes on a gentler tone. There it is known as Caran Raaf. The first night of winter, families gather indoors, early doors bolted against the wind, children play games with apples and nuts, and stories are told by the fire. Yet outside, the roads are said to belong to the spirits of the restless dead known as the Hooch Dada. A spectral black sat hat roams the hills. The story is strange and wild. Half warning and half joke. Parents tell it to keep children indoors, but deep down, even the adults glance nervously toward the door before the story ends. A traveler from England who visited Wales in the late Middle Ages described how villagers wrote prayers on scraps of paper and tossed them into the fire. The ashes were believed to carry the words upward to heaven. He admitted that he could not tell whether the practice was superstition or devotion, but he found it moving all the same. The flames speak kindly to those who listen. He wrote as though surprised by his own faith. You picture the contrast between the regions. In Ireland, wildfires against the sea. In Scotland, music and masks beneath the stars. In Wales, candlelight and whispered prayers by the hearth. Each tradition reveals a slightly different response to the same truth. Winter is coming. The world is growing dark. People must find comfort where they can, whether in laughter, story, or song. The night holds echoes of all these places. You walk through the fields imagining the distant bonfires still burning on faraway hills. Perhaps the smoke from one has drifted this way, mingling with the scent of your own village's ashes. The thought makes the land feel smaller, as if every flame is part of one great invisible circle. An Irish monk once wrote that on famine, all hearths draw their fire from one source. He meant it metaphorically, yet his words fit perfectly. The people of the Isles, divided by distance and language, still share the same rhythm of hope. They light their fires from the same darkness, and in doing so they remind themselves that the year will turn again. As you walk, you pass a shepherd tending his flock by lantern light. He nods to you and says softly, "A good night for remembering." You ask what he means, and he explains that every year he calls the names of his family into the hills, so their spirits may know he has not forgotten them. If they answer, he adds with a smile, they do it in the wind. His voice is calm, certain to him, memory itself is prayer. The moon rises higher, throwing long silver paths across the grass. You can almost see the shadows of other lands overlapping with your own. The dancers of the Highlands, the singers of Wales, the torch-bearers of Ireland, each group believes their version of the night to be the truest. Yet all share the same quiet, longing to keep the darkness at bay, to feel connected to something larger than themselves. You stop at a low stone wall and rest your hands on the cool surface. The moss glows faintly in the moonlight damp beneath your fingers. The air is still, but it carries a sense of presence, as though the many voices of the isles are whispering together, telling the same story in a dozen tongues. It is a story not of ghosts but of gratitude, of facing the end of the year with courage and song. In the distance, another bell begins to toll. The sound travels across valleys and fields, echoing faintly into the dark. Perhaps it is another village marking the same moment, another community greeting the same spirits. You breathe in the cold air, tasting the faint salt of the sea. Far to the west, the night feels wide and kind, filled with the memory of every fire still burning across the land. You turn back toward your own village, the path glowing faintly ahead in the moonlight. Behind you, somewhere across the hills, voices sing in a language you do not know. You cannot tell if it is prayer or celebration, only that it carries the same warmth you have felt everywhere tonight. In that sound lies the heart of the season, many places, many voices, one hope. That light, however small, will always return. The road narrows as it leads you down toward a small river. The air here feels different, carrying the cool scent of water and wood smoke from distant hearths beyond the banks. The path bends into the lowlands, where the fields widen and the language changes again. You have crossed quietly into the heart of the continent, where autumn is more measured and the night of remembrance is solemn rather than wild. In the villages of France, Halloween is not a name people use. They call it El de la Watson, the Eve of All Saints. Instead of bonfires and masks, families light candles in their windows and place small loaves of bread on the hearth. The mood is gentle, reflective. You picture a family gathered around a heavy oak table, their hands folded, their eyes closed in prayer. Outside, rain falls softly on the shutters and the only light comes from the flicker of candles and the glow of the fire. A monk from Normandy once wrote that the French countryside kept quiet vigils that last till dawn. He described villagers staying awake beside the hearth, not from fear but from devotion. Each hour they recited prayers for the souls of their ancestors, trusting that their voices might reach heaven. As the candles burned lower, when the last candle went out, they said the prayers had been carried upward with the smoke. The scene, as he described it, sounds peaceful and full of humility. Travel farther east and the tone shifts again. In the towns of the German lands, All Hallows Eve and All Souls Day blend together. The people call it Schon Noch, the Week of Souls. Every evening, church bells ring slowly and the smell of baking fills the streets. Housewives prepare small pastries shaped like bones or crosses, known as seal and brought or soul bread. Children carry baskets to their neighbors' doors, singing short hymns in exchange for these treats. It is a pious echo of the fowling you saw earlier in England, softened by a quieter faith. An old parish register from Cologne notes that families would leave a single candle burning beside a loaf of bread overnight. The candle's light symbolized the soul's path through darkness and the bread was meant to feed any visiting spirits. Though the gestures seem modest, they show how deeply kindness was woven into the season. In a world where death was familiar, generosity became a shield against despair. In Italy too, the night takes on its own flavor. In small villages of Tuscany, people call it Injury de Mort, the Day of the Dead. The celebration begins not with fear but with preparation. Mothers sweep the house and sprinkle the thresholds with wine, saying it purifies the way for returning souls. Tables are set with figs, chestnuts and small cakes, called fave de morti beans of the dead. Each sweet is shaped like a seed to remind everyone that life continues even in the soil of the grave. A traveler's diary from the 13th century describes walking through an Italian village on this night. He saw candles glowing in every window and heard the faint sound of a lullaby drifting through an open door. He asked who sang it, and an old woman told him, "It is for the souls of the children who could not grow old." Her voice was calm, without sadness, as if caring for the dead was simply another form of love. That simple exchange stayed with him for years. Moving north again into the Low Countries, you find another custom, the lighting of the ghost lanterns. People carve hollowed beets or turnips, placing a single candle inside each one. They set them along paths, bridges and doorways so the souls may find their way home. The soft, trembling lights turn the villages into seas of warm living stars. Children laugh and point, but the adults watch with quiet respect. They believe that those lights mark not just the dead but every act of goodness ever done in their name. Historians studying medieval Europe often remark on how these regional variations reveal a shared human need. Whether the fires are wild or gentle, the prayers whispered or sung, the heart of the festival remains constant, to remember and to give. The details differ, but the intention is the same. Every lamp lit in France, every loaf of bread in Germany, every song in Italy whispers the same message: be kind, because the veil between worlds is thin. And love travels both ways. You stand beside the river and watch the moonlight shimmer across its surface. The water carries reflections of the distant villages, their candles mirrored in ripples of silver. Somewhere downstream, the glow of a lantern moves slowly, perhaps carried by someone walking home from the church. The sound of their steps on the wooden bridge echoes faintly. For a moment, you feel the vastness of the world shrinking into a single, shared heartbeat. A chronicler from Mainz once wrote, "The souls walk together across nations, though the tongues of men divide them." His words fit perfectly. Now, the customs of the isles, the continent and the mountains all blend in your imagination, forming a tapestry of quiet remembrance. Every bell, every crumb of bread, every candle flame is part of one continuous prayer stretching across the map. The wind stirs, lifting your hair and carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and baking bread. You imagine the people behind those scents, families gathered close, whispering the names of the dead, trusting that someone unseen listens. Perhaps the saints themselves wander these paths, unseen but near, guiding memory, like shepherds guide their flocks. As you turn away from the river, the faint sound of distant bells reaches your ears once more. You walk slowly, letting the rhythm of their tolling accompany your steps. The world feels immense yet intimate, every light and sound connected to every other. In that realization lies the heart of this night, the living and the dead, the far and the near, the many and the one, all bound by the same hope. That kindness endures even when candles burn low. The morning light turns the fields pale gold, but the warmth is only an illusion. The air is sharp, carrying the smell of frost and soil. You follow the road that runs between the empty fields where the last shear of grain stand tied in neat rows. Every step crunches on frozen grass. The harvest is finished and the world feels stripped to its bones. It is here, more than anywhere, that the meaning of the season becomes clear. For medieval people, this night was not only a festival of spirits, but also a marker of survival. The year's work had ended, the barns were full or empty, the cattle chosen for slaughter, the grain sealed away. Whatever was done by All Hallows' Eve would have to last through the long winter. Life depended on it. In many villages, the coming cold was spoken of as a second death, and the feast of the dead carried that same quiet acceptance. You pass a farmer standing by his gate watching the horizon. His hands are rough, cracked by the cold. He nods when he sees you and says, "Winter's mouth opens wide tonight." The phrase sounds like poetry, but it is simply his way of speaking. He means that the season of scarcity has begun. Old accounts of rural life describe this time as both celebration and anxiety. The grain lofts were checked again and again, the dried apples and salted meats inspected for rot. In northern regions, families counted their candles to make sure they would last until spring. Priests preached that good Christians should give thanks. Yet behind every prayer lingered a question: would the stores hold out? Would the animals live? Would the light return? At the edge of the field, a group of women gathers around a small fire built from leftover stalks. They warm their hands and toss handfuls of seeds into the flames. One says softly, "For next year's growth." The others nod. The gesture is not church-taught, but ancient, older than any sermon. Scholars of agricultural customs still argue whether such rituals were remnants of pagan harvest rites or simple expressions of hope. Either way, they reveal how deeply people felt their bond with the earth. A curious note in a memorial record from Yorkshire mentions villagers spending the evening in the barns drinking ale and telling ghost stories. So the grain would not feel lonely. It may sound like superstition, yet it shows how vividly they imagined life in every object around them. The harvest was not just labor, it was relationship. The fields had personalities, the weather, moods, and the harvest its own spirit that required comfort. You crouch to pick up a piece of grain husk from the ground. It crumbles easily between your fingers. Even now it smells faintly of sunlight and dust. This was the heart of survival, each kernel a promise against the dark months ahead. To waste food was sin, but to share it was salvation. That is why every feast, every act of giving on Halloween night carried such weight. Generosity was both moral and practical. A traveling friar once wrote that to feed the hungry in autumn is to invite angels to guard your stores. The saying became popular among farmers who feared winter theft or famine. Acts of charity, they believed, created invisible protection. Perhaps that is why so many households left bread for the poor and the dead alike. In their minds, both could bless a home. As you walk along the Hero, you see children gathering fallen branches. Their parents follow behind dragging bundles of kindling. The sound of snapping twigs fills the air. Each family needs its firewood stacked before the frost deepens. Smoke begins to rise from chimneys all over the valley, thin gray ribbons reaching toward the pale sky. For a moment it looks as if the whole land is exhaling at once. A woman kneels in her garden, covering the last of the herbs with straw. She presses the earth gently, murmuring, "Sleep well, and wake again." The rhythm of her words sounds like a lullaby. Even the soil, she believes, deserves to bless before the freeze. Later, scholars who studied these agricultural prayers noted that they often blended references to saints with affection for the land itself. Faith and farming spoke the same language, the promise that death, whether of crops or of people, was never the end. The wind grows stronger. It rattles through the dry stalks like whispered voices. You pull your cloak tighter and look toward the horizon, where the sun struggles to climb. Its weak light spreads across the frost, turning everything silver for a moment. It is beautiful but fragile, like the hope that sustains the villages. By late morning the farmers will return indoors to their bread and broth and the last traces of Halloween will fade into memory. But the essence of it lingers in every motion of their lives, in the careful counting of stores, in the prayers whispered to soil and sky, in the quiet faith that warmth will return. You pause by a gate and watch a raven circling above the fields. Its cry is harsh, echoing across the valley. To some it might be an omen, but to you, it feels like defiance, a sound that refuses the silence of winter. The bird settles on a fence post, feathers gleaming like polished stone. It watches you for a moment before taking flight again, heading toward the woods. The road stretches on, lined with bare hedges and pale grass. The season of light has ended, yet the memory of it endures. As you walk, you think of all the small fires burning in hearths and hearts across the land, each one holding back the dark for another day. This is the truest form of celebration, not wildness or wealth, but endurance. To survive the winter, the people must carry warmth in their stories, their faith and their hands. When you reach the crest of the hill, the village lies below you, smoke rising in steady threads. The church bells toll faintly again, calling for the morning mass of All Saints. The sound mingles with the sighing of the wind through the stubble fields. In that blend of prayer and earth, you feel the rhythm of life continuing quiet and steady as it always has. The wind carries the scent of wood smoke and damp soil. As you walk toward the row of cottages that mark the edge of the village, the festival's noise has faded now, leaving only quiet voices and the rustle of straw beneath your boots. The night may have ended, but its customs continue in gentler forms. Doors open and close softly, hearths burn low, and people begin their final rituals of protection before winter tightens its grip. At the first cottage, a woman steps outside holding a small bowl of glowing embers. She kneels and traces a circle of smoke around her doorway, murmuring words you cannot quite catch. Then she sprinkles salt into the threshold and taps the lintel 3 times with a wooden spoon. When she sees you watching, she smiles shiny to keep what's good in and what's ill out. She explains. Her tone is calm, not fearful. For her this is no superstition, but habit as ordinary as sweeping the floor. This kind of ritual, known as a threshold charm, was one of the simplest yet most enduring practices of the Middle Ages. People believed that danger entered through doors and windows, the boundaries between the safe and the unknown. Chroniclers who wrote about such customs often mocked them. Yet even in monasteries, monks sometimes marked their doors with chalk crosses. On this night, boundaries, whether of wood or faith, needed tending. You move along the path to another home where an old man sits on a stool carving something into the wood above his door. When you come closer you see the letters C.M.B. freshly etched. He nods and says, "Caspar, Measure, Balthasar, the 3 wise kings, it is a blessing." He repeats each year, believing that their names keep misfortune from crossing his threshold. The marks will fade with rain and time, but their meaning lingers like a quiet promise. Inside the houses, families prepare for sleep. The smell of smoke and herbs fills the air. A mother drops sprigs of rosemary and sage onto the fire, saying they sweeten the dreams. The children watch the flames twist and curl their eyes. Heavy on the table, a candle burns beside a cup of milk and a crust of bread. For whoever walks tonight, the father says softly before snuffing the candle. The bread will be gone by morning, though perhaps eaten by a neighbor's cat. Still, the gesture matters. In a cottage farther down, a widow opens her window for a brief moment to let the night air in. She touches the frame, whispers a name, then closes it again. The air inside the house stirs and the candlelight trembles. Her actions are tender, not tragic. She is not summoning the dead, but acknowledging them, keeping memory alive through the smallest movement of her hands. An old record from Brittany mentions that on this night, villagers scattered ashes from the hearth across their thresholds, believing it confused wandering spirits who tried to enter. Others hung sprigs of ivy or holly in the corners of windows. One scholar suggested that these acts were a kind of language between people and their houses, a way of saying, "We belong to this place and this place protects us." You step back outside and notice how every door glows faintly with fire light. Smoke rises gently from the chimneys, merging into a low silvery haze that covers the rooftops. The air hums with a strange stillness, as if every house is breathing together. Somewhere in the distance a fox barks, sharp and brief. The sound makes the dogs in the village answer, their barks overlapping like a warning and a song. A priest once wrote that faith alone could guard a home. But even he admitted that the Lord's blessing may ride as easily on a handful of salt as on a psalm. The line is half joke, half truth. People need actions as much as prayers. The rituals of the threshold remind them that they are not helpless. Every pinch of salt, every whispered word, every circle of smoke is a declaration that they will endure whatever the winter brings. You walk to the edge of the lane where the last house stands alone beside a field. Its shutters are closed tight, but a faint glow leaks through the cracks. A young woman stands by the door holding a bowl of water. She dips her fingers in and flicks droplets toward the corners of the house, naming each one aloud, the north, the south, the east and the west. So the winds will know us and pass. Gently, she says. Her tone is simple, reverent. You watch as she sets the bowl down by the doorstep where the moonlight catches it and makes it gleam like silver. It strikes you how these acts, so small and quiet, carry centuries within them. The people performing them might not know where the customs began, yet they keep them alive through faith, habit and love. In their repetition lies comfort. To bless a house is to remind oneself that home is sacred, no matter how humble. You lift your eyes to the hills where a faint glow marks the site of last night's bonfire. Its ashes are cold now, but the memory of light remains. The villagers have carried a spark of that flame into their hearths, their prayers, their gestures. That spark, multiplied across every doorway and window, becomes a shield. The night may hold its mysteries, but inside those houses, warmth and memory reign. As you turn away, a thin thread of cloud crosses the moon, the wind rises and rattles the shutters. You imagine the people inside, safe beneath their charms and blessings, asleep beside dying fires. Their world is small, their belief simple, but in them lies an unshakable grace. The doors are sealed, the lamps dimmed and the village exhales, wrapped in a circle of faith that even the cold cannot break. The night deepens, quiet and cold, and the wind curls through the lanes like a wandering thought. Most of the fires have died down now, leaving the village covered in shadow. The few candles still burning glow faintly behind shutters. It feels as though the whole world is holding its breath. Yet not everyone sleeps. For some, this hour belongs to dreams and divinations, to questions whispered into the dark. You pass a small house with its window slightly open, a thin line of light spilling out. Inside, a young woman sits before a mirror. Her hair hangs loose over her shoulders and a single candle burns beside her. The air trembles with stillness. She watches her reflection as though waiting for it to move. After a long moment she closes her eyes, murmuring something too soft to hear. When she opens them again, she smiles faintly, half relieved, half unsure. In many parts of medieval Europe, people believed that this was the one night when the future could be glimpsed. The same thin veil that let spirits cross between worlds also allowed mortals to peek through. A note in a manuscript from Lincolnshire describes maidens gazing into bowls of water to see the face of him who shall wed them. Others burned nutshells or cast apple peels to read the shapes they formed. To the modern mind it might seem playful, but to them, it was serious, almost sacred. The woman before the mirror sets the candle down and picks up a bowl of water. She drops in a silver coin. Watching the ripples spread for fortune, she whispers. Her breath fogs the air. Folklore says that if the coin sinks smoothly, the coming year will be prosperous. If it wobbles, hardship lies ahead. The coin trembles once, then settles flat. She exhales slowly, her shoulders relaxing. The smallest sign can soothe the largest worry. In another house nearby, two girls sit side by side on the hearth roasting hazelnuts in the fire. Each nut carries the name of a suitor scratched into its shell. They watch as the heat makes them pop and jump. If they burn together, so will the hearts. One of them recites. The nuts crack, spark and roll apart. The girls squeal with laughter, pretending disappointment. Their mother shakes her head but cannot help smiling. Games like these are allowed only tonight, when play touches mystery. A monk who kept parish notes in the 14th century wrote of such customs with mild disapproval, calling them idle fancies of maidens. Yet his tone betrays amusement. He admits that even the most devout sometimes waited to see whether their candle flickered toward or away from them, reading omens in its smoke. Faith and curiosity have always shared the same space. You step outside again, the cold brushing your face like silk. The moon sits high, now bright and pities, silvering the rooftops. Across the lane, another cottage window glows faintly blue. You approach quietly and see an elderly couple sitting at a table. Between them burns a small oil lamp. They hold hands, eyes closed, listening. After a long silence the man says softly, "Do you feel them?" She nods. Always tonight they do not seem afraid. To them the presence of their ancestors is comfort, not threat. In some regions people believe that dreams on this night carried messages from the other side. Sleep was treated as a holy state halfway between the body and the spirit. To invite such dreams, sleepers performed small rituals, washing their feet in scented water, placing herbs under their pillows or reciting verses before lying down. A herbal manuscript from Italy lists valerian thyme and mugwort as plants that open the gates of true visions. The recipe's margins are filled with notes written by different hands over the years, each adding their own variation, each believing the right mixture could open the mind to prophecy. The girl with the mirror has now extinguished her candle. She lies on her bed staring at the ceiling beams, whispering a name. Before closing her eyes, she hopes to dream of her future husband. Outside, the wind rattles the shutters and the sound seems to answer her whisper. Perhaps it is only the wind, or perhaps it is something older, listening kindly. You walk past another home where a group of young men sit around a table reading the patterns of melted wax dripped into water. They lean close, laughing and guessing what each shape means: a crown for luck, a ring for marriage, a coin for wealth. One man claims his wax formed a ship and vows he will sail before spring. The others tease him, but their laughter has warmth. Such moments filled with hope and imagination knit the long night together across Europe. Scholars found similar practices in every village, from Ireland to Poland. Some involve mirrors, others fire or food, but all share the same desire to reach beyond the ordinary. The historian who studied these rites wrote that they were not rebellion against faith but an extension of it. When the world feels uncertain, it is human to look for signs, whether in scripture or in smoke. You stop at the top of the hill and look back at the village. The lights flicker in a rhythm that feels alive, as if each window beats like a small heart. Somewhere inside someone dreams. Somewhere else someone waits for a vision that may never come. The night stretches calm and infinite, cradling both belief and doubt in equal measure. A soft mist begins to rise again, curling around the chimneys. You breathe in its damp sweetness and close your eyes for a moment. If the old stories are right, this is when the world listens best, when wishes whispered to the dark travel farthest. You let one slip from your lips, not a question, but a hope for peace, for safety, for light returning. The wind carries it away, and you imagine it joining 1,000 other murmurs drifting through the air tonight, a chorus of heart speaking softly to whatever watches. Above. The mist curls low again across the fields. As midnight approaches, the world feels suspended, caught between silence and motion. Far off, you hear the faint rumble of wind sweeping through the hills, a sound that grows until it almost resembles distant hooves. The villagers know that sound well. They call it the ride of the wild hunt. It is a legend whispered when the nights grow longest, when even the faithful cross themselves. Before stepping outside, you stand on the edge of the road that winds toward the forest. The air has changed sharper now, carrying the faint scent of pine and frost. In the distance, clouds gather like dark banners across the moon. The trees sway and the wind moans through them as though something vast and restless moves behind the branches. According to old tales told in nearly every corner of medieval Europe, the wild hunt rides on nights such as this. Some say the hunters are ancient kings leading their ghostly armies through the sky. Others claim they are souls of the damned, forever chasing what they can never catch. A monk in Saxony rode a phantom horseman clothed in storm clouds, their hounds howling like wind through stone. He admitted he had never seen them himself but added, "Many have heard. The people in your village speak of it too. They say that when the wind grows fierce enough to shake the shutters, the hunt passes overhead. Dogs whine, crows fall silent and travelers on the road kneel until the sound fades. To glimpse the riders is considered both curse and honor. Curse because their leader may claim your spirit for his host. Honor because it means you have seen the border between worlds open for a breath. You walk a little farther, the ground crunching beneath your boots, the moon slips behind the clouds and the night darkens somewhere in the distance. Thunder murmurs without lightning. The sound vibrates through the air, low and steady. You imagine hooves striking stone, iron-shod and relentless. A chill moves up your spine. Yet part of you wants to see. Humans have always feared the unknown, but curiosity has a hunger of its own. A story collected from the forests of Norway tells of a shepherd who once heard the hunt pass above him. He lay face down in the snow, trembling as voices shouted in a language he could not understand. When the storm ended, he found a silver arrow embedded in the ground beside him. He hung it above his door for protection and claimed no storm ever harmed his home again. Whether it truly happened or not, the tale still lives wherever the wind howls hardest, the clouds shift and a thin streak of moonlight cuts across the road. For an instant you think you see movement in the sky, a pale shimmer, almost like wings. Then the flicker of something darker. The air whips around you, and you hear what could be laughter or the cry of birds, or the sound of hooves pounding unseen earth. You hold your breath, waiting. The noise swells and then fades, leaving the air ringing in its absence. Only the rustle of the trees remains. The legend of the hunt has many shapes. In Germany, they call the leader woman or Herne the Horned One. In Brittany he is a ghostly lord who hunts sinners. In England some say it is King Arthur searching for lost knights. Each version carries the same heart, the belief that power roams the skies when the year turns cold, collecting the souls of the restless. Historians who study these tales see them as echoes of older myths, fragments of ancient gods that never fully died. The villagers do not debate origins, they simply bow their heads. When the wind begins to roar, you crouch by a stone wall. As the gusts strengthen again, the air tastes of rain and iron. Then, just at the edge of hearing, you catch a sound like distant horns. It rises and falls, a mournful call that sets every hair on your arm. Standing upright, the clouds churn, moonlight flickers through them and for a heartbeat you think you see a rider outlined against the stars, cloak streaming, eyes bright as embers. The vision vanishes as quickly as it came, leaving only wind and silence. You release your breath slowly, unsure if what you felt was terror or awe, or perhaps both. You think of how people before you must have felt, walking home from fields or tending fires, hearing that same echo across the hills. To them, the hunt was proof that the world beyond this one was never far away. The living and the dead shared the same sky, separated only by courage and wind. A note written by an English cleric in the 12th century describes villagers gathering after such nights to tell what they had heard. "It is no sin to speak of them," he wrote, "for what rides above us belongs to God's mystery. The church may not have blessed the stories, but it never silenced them either. Some mysteries are too vast to fit inside sermons." The wind quiets again, leaving only the creak of trees. The clouds break apart, and the stars return scattered and bright. You straighten and look toward the horizon, where dawn glows faintly pink. Whatever passed has gone, leaving the world washed clean, the fields shimmer with frost, each blade of grass tipped with silver. You feel suddenly small, yet connected to everything, the sky, the ground, the whispering wind that remembers every story ever told beneath it. You turn back toward the village. Smoke begins to rise again from chimneys and the first rooster calls. The wild hunt, whether real or imagined, has done its work. It has reminded the living of their place in the great rhythm of life and death. You walk slowly, the cold biting your fingers, the sound of the fading wind like a benediction. Behind you, in every gust, you can still hear the echo of hooves, distant and eternal. The dawn arrives quietly, as if cautious after the long night. The first light spills over the thatched roofs, softening their outlines and painting the frost with gold. Smoke rises gently from chimneys, carrying the scent of peat bread and sweet herbs. The village stirs again. Doors open, buckets clatter at wells and dogs stretch in the pale sunlight. The storm and the hunt have passed, leaving behind only calm air and a strange lingering stillness. You walk through the lanes greeting a few sleepy faces. People nod but speak little. Their voices are low, respectful, as though they have all shared the same strange dream. A woman sweeps her doorstep, muttering a blessing into the chill morning. A boy feeds a handful of grain to the chickens and pauses to watch his breath rise like smoke. The night's weight has not fully lifted. It sits quietly behind their movements. Inside the church, the candles have burned low, leaving pools of wax on the altar. The relics, polished, again, gleam faintly in the golden light. The priest kneels at the front, murmuring a final prayer for the souls remembered in the surrounding night. The few villagers who remained for the vigil begin to leave, rubbing their tired eyes, their faces peaceful. This is All Saints' morning, a day for gratitude rather than fear. You follow the sound of a bell ringing. Somewhere near the fields, the farmers have already begun their work again. The fields shimmer with frost, each furrow sparkling. One man drives his plow slowly across the cold ground, his oxen steaming with breath. He looks up when he sees you and grins. "The dead are fed," he says cheerfully. "Now we feed the living." His tone holds both humor and truth. A chronicler in the 13th century wrote that after the night of All Hallows, villages often held a quiet meal of thanksgiving. He called it the Feast of the Morning Hearth. It was a time for families to gather, not to summon spirits, but to celebrate survival and work. After so much darkness, even a pot of porridge and a slice of bread felt like a luxury. You step into one of the cottages where a family is finishing breakfast. The fire burns bright, the air warm and thick with the smell of butter and oats. The mother ladles steaming porridge into wooden bowls while her children chatter softly. On the table sits a small loaf marked with a cross. The father breaks it carefully, placing a piece aside for those who watched with us. He says no one asks who he means. Everyone nods understanding. The medieval world rarely separated the sacred from the ordinary. To eat together after a night of prayer was as holy as any sermon. Food carried memory and the table was an altar of its own. In some regions, people even baked their bread with a pinch of ashes from the festival fire, believing it brought blessing for the year ahead. A monk who recorded this custom called it the taste of eternity in the mouth of the present. Outside, children chase one another through the frost, their laughter high and bright. One girl carries a turnip lantern from the night before. Its candle has burned out, but she holds it proudly as though it still glowed. Her brother teases her, pretending to be a ghost. Their play turns the sacred back into joy, as it always does. The village breathes again. You walk toward the outskirts where the land opens into gentle hills, the sun climbs higher, turning the mist into ribbons of light. From here you can see the church, the cottages, and the traces of last night's fires now just faint circles of ash. Each one marks a moment of connection, prayer, laughter, remembrance, hope. The festival has ended, but its warmth lingers, invisible, yet real. A scholar who studied the rhythms of medieval life once observed that these celebrations were a conversation with time. The people did not worship death, but acknowledged its place beside them. Each year, the same customs repeated, like a heartbeat steadying them against uncertainty. The candles might burn out, but the gestures endured, keeping the line between past and future intact. In the distance, a flock of birds rises suddenly, their wings flashing white against the sky. They twist and turn in perfect unison, moving as one body, before settling again near the river. The sight makes you pause. There is something deeply human in their flight, the need to gather, to move together through change, to find warmth in company. The villagers, with their songs and fires, are no different. The wind picks up, carrying faint echoes of voices. Perhaps it is only the farmers calling to one another, but it feels older, like the memory of last night's song still tangled in the air. You close your eyes for a moment and let it wash over you. There is no fear in it now, only calm. The spirits have been honored, the boundaries respected, and the living can turn once more toward the rhythm of their days. By noon the frost begins to melt. Water drips from the eaves, glinting in the sunlight. A few villagers gather near the well, filling buckets and sharing quiet conversation. One man says, "The air feels lighter." Another replies, "That's the saints walking back to heaven." They laugh softly, half joking, half believing in this world. Belief does not need proof. It lives comfortably in the space between laughter and faith. You take a final look at the village as the day unfolds. Children play, smoke curls, bells chime. Life continues humble and radiant. The long night is over, but its lessons remain. That memory keeps the world stitched together, that generosity guards the heart, and that even in the coldest season, warmth can be made by human hands. You walk down the road again, the sound of the church bell fading behind you. The horizon glows with pale sunlight, soft and kind. The night has passed, but its echo lingers like a gentle hum, reminding you that peace is not the absence of fear, but the quiet knowledge that light always returns. The afternoon sun drifts lower, spreading long shadows over the fields. The village has grown calm again. Its people return to their work. You hear the soft clatter of tools, the bark of a dog, the rhythmic thud of a pestle crushing grain. Yet in quiet corners, reminders of last night still linger, a wisp of smoke from an old fire, a candle left burning in a window, a few children walking in pairs, retelling stories of the wild hunt. With wide eyes and dramatic gestures, the sacred and the ordinary now walk side by side, comfortable again. You follow the lane toward the meadow where the grass lies flattened by frost. There, a few villagers have gathered for a task that feels almost ceremonial. They are tending the ashes of the great bonfire. The men rake the charred wood into piles, while the women fill baskets with the darker soil beneath. When you ask what they are doing, one smiles and says, "We spread it on the fields. It brings luck and keeps the roots strong." This practice, mixing the ashes of festival fires into the land, is ancient. A record from the abbey at Glastonbury mentions monks observing it among the local farmers. Though they frowned upon its heathen air, they admitted the soil seemed to grow richer afterward. Perhaps it was coincidence, perhaps not. In the eyes of the villagers, what fed the fire now feeds the earth, and what once rose to the sky returns as blessing. The women move carefully, their skirts brushing against the frosted grass. The smell of old smoke clings to their hands. One of them hums softly a tune without words. It rises and falls like breath. You recognize it as one of the melodies sung around the fire the night before. Even now, in daylight, it sounds like a prayer. The children nearby join in, their voices high and pure, and for a moment the field feels alive again with music. A monk's chronicle from the 13th century describes how, in some English villages, the ashes were divided into 3 portions, one scattered over the fields, one kept in the hearth to protect the house, and one sprinkled over graves to bless the resting souls. The act linked heaven, home and earth in one gesture. Scholars later argued over whether this was superstition or quiet theology, but to those who lived it, such distinctions never mattered. The world was a single fabric, every thread sacred. The men finished their work and stepped back. The last pile of ash glows faintly in the sunlight, its surface shimmering with tiny sparks of quartz. One farmer kneels, takes a handful and lets it slip through his fingers. "The fire remembers," he says. His voice is steady, neither fearful nor reverent. Only sure. He wipes his hands on his tunic and walks away, leaving the ashes to scatter in the wind. You watch as the breeze lifts the fine dust into the air. It swirls and catches the light, turning briefly golden before fading into invisibility for a heartbeat. The movement resembles the smoke from last night's fires, as if the past itself is being carried forward grain by grain. You breathe it in and feel the faint scent of wood and warmth, the ghost of celebration lingering in your lungs. A group of children begins playing nearby, drawing shapes in the dirt with sticks. One traces a circle and says it is a sun, another adds lines that look like rays. Their laughter breaks the stillness. Pure and clear, the world, newly blessed, seems ready for its next chapter. As you continue walking, you pass a small orchard at the edge of the meadow. The trees stand bare, except for a few stubborn apples, their skins wrinkled from the cold. A man climbs a ladder and plucks the last fruit, dropping them into a basket for cider, he explains smiling, and for the saints if they're thirsty. His words are light-hearted, but he bows slightly before setting the basket down, a gesture older than his faith. Even now, gratitude shapes every action. In a nearby clearing, a few women hang garlands of ivy and dried flowers on the door of a barn. You ask why, and one answers to thank the animals for their work. She pats the flank of a patient ox whose breath rises in little clouds. The gesture is tender. The festival of the dead has become, by morning, a celebration of life itself. A traveler's account from Burgundy mentions similar customs, describing how villagers blessed their tools and beasts after the night of All Hallows. He noted that the prayers were simple, often improvised: thank you for bread, for breath, for fire that warms. These words, he said, carried the rhythm of the earth more deeply than the Latin chants of the church. Perhaps both were needed, the formal and the familiar, the written and the lived. The sky begins to blush with the first colors of evening. A thin line of pink spreads along the horizon, melting into gold. The farmers finish their work and begin to walk home. Their baskets empty, their faces flushed from the cold. The children run ahead, laughing, their boots kicking up clouds of ash and dust. The wind carries their voices far, mingling them with the soft rustle of the dying grass. You pause at the edge of the field and look back. The land stretches before you, dark and gleaming, sure with the remains of last night's fire. It is quiet now, yet full of life. The villagers may not think of themselves as poets, yet every act they perform is a poem written in earth and smoke. They have turned their fears into rituals, their labor into thanksgiving. The first star appears above the hills, faint and trembling. It reminds you of the candle that burned beside every hearth last night, the one flame kept for the souls of the departed. That small light, repeated in every home, has become a constellation, now scattered across the heavens. The boundary between night and day, between life and memory, feels gentler than ever. You turn toward the village as the bells begin to ring again. The sound rolls softly across the fields, gathering the last of the day into its rhythm. Each note seems to say the same thing. The villagers already know in their bones that endings are never final, and what burns away returns again as warmth, as soil, as song. Evening descends slowly, painting the horizon in deep gold and violet. The first thin trails of chimney smoke rise straight into the still air. The festival has ended, yet its spirit lingers quietly in every corner. You walk through the village again and notice that people move differently now, slower, softer, as though their bodies still carry the rhythm of last night's prayers. Near the square, a few children are sitting beside the old fire pit. They poke the ashes with sticks, hoping to find small bits of charcoal to draw with. One boy sketches a rough cross on a stone, another draws the outline of a horse, the youngest her face smudged with soot hums, a tune that sounds like something from the night before. Their play is innocent, but it carries echoes of something older. Ritual becomes memory and memory becomes game. At the edge of the square, a group of elders sits on a long bench. They talk quietly, their words carrying just enough to reach your ears. One of them, her hair white and braided, tells a story to the others. It is about a time when the dead walked openly through the streets asking for warmth. They were not frightening, she says, only cold. And we gave them bread. The others nod, not surprised. Stories like this have been told for generations, folded gently into the fabric of belief. An old chronicle from the Low Countries records that elders often gathered after All Hallows to share night tales for the young. The writer disapproved, calling them heathen fancies. Yet he admitted they served a purpose in a world without books. For most people, stories carried wisdom, comfort and sometimes warning. They reminded listeners that the world was wider than they could see. The woman continues her tale. She speaks of a man who refused to light a candle for his ancestors, claiming he owed them nothing. That night the wind blew through his house and his bread turned to dust. The next year he lit 2 candles instead and his harvest was rich. The listeners smile, half believing, half amused. You see, she finishes. Even the stubborn learn to be kind. Her words draw gentle laughter, the kind that warms rather than mocks. You sit quietly nearby listening as the conversation drifts from story to memory. One man recalls the wild laughter of the children chasing apples. Another mentions the soft singing at dawn. It felt lighter this year, he says. The air, his neighbor nods. Maybe the dead are resting better. They speak of such things with familiarity, not as fantasy but as part of life's balance. In a nearby doorway a mother braids her daughter's hair while the girl asks questions about the night. Did the spirits really visit us, she says. The mother smiles, tying the final knot. Maybe, she answers, or maybe they're always here, listening when we remember them. The child thinks for a moment, then nods as though satisfied. For her, that explanation is enough. A scholar who studied these oral traditions once wrote that such stories were the threads that stitched eternity into everyday life. Each retelling reshaped belief, keeping it alive through the voices of the old and the wonder of the young. What the church taught in stone, the villagers carried in song and story. The words might change, but the heart of them stayed constant. The dead deserve remembrance and the living must keep the light. You wander toward the small tavern at the edge of the square. Inside, a fire burns steadily and the smell of ale and roasted onions fills the air. A handful of villagers sit around the hearth, their faces glowing in the orange light. Someone strums a lute, plucking soft notes that blend with the murmur of conversation. It feels peaceful, as though the night itself has come inside to rest. The tavern keeper pours you a cup of cider and says, "To a quiet year." His words are met with murmured agreement. They have lived through plague, frost and famine, yet tonight their tone is hopeful. The festival has reminded them that even the smallest joys, a warm drink, a shared story, carry weight. Every sip, every song becomes a defiance of winter's silence. A man at the next table begins to sing an old ballad. The melody is slow and haunting, telling of a traveler guided home by the lanterns of the dead. His voice is rough but tender, and when he finishes the room is silent for a heartbeat before soft applause fills the space. The singer bows his head for those who lit the way, he says. Outside, the night spreads calm across the fields. The moon rises again, pale and round. Frost glitters on the thatched roofs like scattered stars. You stand for a moment beneath the eaves, listening to the faint hum of music from the tavern and the quiet rhythm of life settling back into place. It feels as if the village itself exhales content. Somewhere far off, a dog barks once, then falls silent. The church bell tolls a single time, marking the hour. The sound rolls gently across the valley, touching every house in turn. Inside each home, candles flicker lower their light, reflected in tired eyes that close slowly toward rest. You think of how this night, repeated for centuries, has shaped the souls of the people who live here. Through fear, faith and laughter. They have built a bridge across the seasons. The living have spoken to the dead and the dead perhaps, have listened in their small acts. Lighting a candle, sharing bread, telling a story, they have kept hope alive. The moon climbs higher, bathing the square in silver. You can still see the children's drawings on the stones, faint outlines glowing like runes. They will fade with the morning frost, yet something of them will remain. In every new year new hands will draw again, and the rhythm will continue. The night has taught them gently that even the smallest mark made with care can outlast its maker. You breathe deeply, feeling the cool air fill your chest. The scent of smoke and cider lingers, mingled with the sweetness of damp earth. The village around you sleeps, or whispers, or dreams, but its spirit feels awake. You look up at the moon one last time and for a moment it seems brighter than before, as if smiling down upon all who remembered, all who dared to hope that warmth can survive even the longest night. The moon is high when the last ember in the square finally fades, a deep hush settles over the village, that peculiar quiet which comes only when everyone sleeps. The air feels fragile now, as though one breath could shatter it. You walk toward the meadow again, where the frost has returned, and the grass sparkles under the starlight. The land looks almost new, polished by the cold. You stop beside the old stone well at the edge of the field. Its rim is covered with a thin crust of ice and a faint glow reflects from the water below. For centuries people have come to this well to make wishes, to ask for healing, to drop tokens of hope into its depths. Coins lie at the bottom, dull flashes of copper catching the moonlight. You pick one up from the edge and feel its chill against your palm. In the Middle Ages, wells like this were sacred places long before churches stood nearby. People believed that water was alive with divine presence. Pilgrims came from miles away to drink from holy wells, leaving ribbons, bread or coins in offering. When Christianity spread, priests blessed these springs, claiming them for saints but leaving their old magic untouched. One bishop writing in the 12th century confessed, "I cannot forbid the people their wells, for faith and water are both gifts from God." You lean over the edge and watch your reflection ripple. The face that stares back looks softer than before, lit by a mix of starlight and memory. You drop the coin into the water. It falls without a sound, swallowed instantly by darkness. You whisper a quiet hope into the still air for whom you are not sure. Perhaps for the people you have met tonight, perhaps for yourself. The ripples spread and fade across the field. A faint sound catches your ear. It is the low hum of someone singing. You follow it toward the small chapel on the hill, its outline barely visible against the stars. The door stands ajar and inside a single candle burns. The voice belongs to the priest, though he sings alone now. His chant is low and steady, a melody without beginning or end. The words are Latin, but the tone is pure lullaby. You step quietly inside. The scent of wax and cold stone fills the air. The walls, still decorated with faded paintings of saints and angels, seem to shimmer in the flickering light. The priest glances at you and nods before turning back to his song. Requiemum, donor eyes, he whispers. Eternal rest grant unto them. The words float upward, soft and endless, joining the silence like threads weaving into cloth. A chronicler from Flanders once described priests doing just this, staying awake to pray for those who had no family left, to remember them. For every forgotten soul, he wrote, there must be one who stays the night. The thought touches you. In a world filled with uncertainty, the simplest act, keeping a candle lit for someone unseen, feels like defiance against oblivion. You watch the flame flicker on the altar. Its light is small but unwavering. In it, you see the same spark that burned in the villagers' hearths, the same glow that danced in the children's lanterns. Everything circles back to this. One flame passed from hand to hand, life to life. It is not a grand miracle, only a quiet continuity. But it is enough. The priest finishes his hymn and folds his hands. They are at peace, he says softly, though he might be speaking to himself. He nods to you again, then begins to snuff out the candles one by one, leaving only the one on the altar. As each wick dies, the room grows darker until the last flame becomes the only point of light in the world. You leave the chapel and step into the open air. The stars are countless now, cold and bright, mirrored faintly in the frost below. The world feels vast but strangely intimate, like a great cathedral without walls. You breathe in deeply and the air tastes of wood, smoke and salt. Every sound carries for miles, a creaking branch, the soft flutter of a bird, the sigh of the wind across the grass. It occurs to you that this is what the villagers have always known. Their faith is not about conquering darkness, but living alongside it. They do not need to prove the existence of souls or saints. They simply honor what they love, trusting that love itself is eternal. Each act, from lighting a candle to singing a song, becomes both prayer and memory. As you walk back toward the village, you see the faint orange glow of the hearths through cracks in the shutters. Inside, people sleep beneath heavy blankets, their faces peaceful. Somewhere, a baby stirs and its mother soothes it with a quiet lullaby. The sound is barely audible, yet it carries through the stillness like a thread of warmth. You look once more toward the chapel on the hill. The single candle still burns. Its glow touches the frosted grass and seems to stretch toward every home. You realize that what the villagers have done this night is not merely ritual but renewal. They have fed both the living and the dead with their kindness. They have tended not only to their fires but to their hearts. The wind shifts, carrying a whisper through the air. It could be prayer, it could be memory, or it could simply be the sound of the earth breathing. Whatever it is, it fills you with a calm certainty that the world, for all its shadows, is tender at its core. You keep walking until you reach the square. Again, the silence, deep as sleep. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster calls, early and uncertain. The long night is nearly over. Dawn approaches, slowly spreading a pale silver over the roofs of the village. The air feels washed, clean, thin and clear as glass. The bells begin to ring again, gentle this time, calling the people to the morning. Mass of All Souls. One by one, doors open, cloaked figures emerge, walking quietly through the dew-soaked lanes toward the church. You follow them, your footsteps muffled in the damp grass. Inside, the air is warmer, heavy with candle wax and incense. The villagers kneel side by side, their faces glowing softly in the flickering light. The priest stands before the altar, his voice low but steady. He reads the names written on scraps of parchment, each one representing a soul remembered today. Some names are spoken aloud, others whispered silently into the air. The sound of them fills the space like music in medieval villages. This morning marked the true closing of the festival. All Souls' Day belonged to prayer rather than play. The joy of feasting gave way to reflection, the laughter of the living replaced by the murmur of remembrance. A chronicler from York described the moment perfectly: the night honors the fire, but the morning honors the ashes. It was a time to let go, to trust that the departed had heard and that the living could now move forward. The priest lifts a small censer and thin ribbons of smoke spiral upward. For those we loved and for those we never knew, he says. The words are simple, but they hold more power than any sermon. You watch as the smoke drifts toward the ceiling and disappears into the beams, rising like a bridge between this world and whatever waits beyond. The congregation joins him in a low chant. The melody is slow and circular, each phrase folding into the next. The voices blend together until they sound like a single breath. You notice that even the children sing their small voices, weaving into the harmony with ease. There is no fear in them now, only calm. The night has taught them that the unseen can be kind. A widow, sitting near the front, clutches a candle, its flame trembling slightly. When the priest calls her husband's name, she lifts the candle higher, her face serene. Nearby, an old man touches his chest as the name of his son is read. No tears fall. The room is too full of quiet dignity for that. Each gesture, each breath feels like an offering. After the prayers, the people begin to leave outside. The morning has brightened, the frost melting into tiny droplets that glitter on the grass. A group of children gathers around the churchyard, placing small bunches of flowers on the graves. The flowers are simple: daisies, marigolds, sprigs of rosemary. One child presses her palm flat against a headstone and whispers, "Sleep warm." The words vanish into the air, but something of their warmth remains. A traveler from Burgundy once wrote that All Souls' Morning was the gentlest day of the year, when even the crows seemed to call more softly. He described walking through villages where the smell of baking bread mingled with incense, where every face wore the same expression of contentment, as though the entire world had taken a deep breath. You can see that same peace here. You wander toward the square. The last of the candle stubs from last night's vigil has burned away, leaving faint circles of wax on the stones. A woman is sweeping the ashes into a small basket. She plans to scatter them in her garden. "So the saints may bless my cabbages," she says, smiling. You realize how seamlessly these people have blended devotion and practicality, turning faith into something that nourishes both spirit and soil. Nearby the children are playing again, chasing each other around the well. Their laughter rings through the crisp air, bright and fearless. One of them carries a single candle, protecting it carefully with cupped hands, as if it were treasure. When the flame flickers, the child laughs harder and somehow the sound feels like the truest prayer of all. A historian once wrote that festivals like this survived for centuries because they spoke to a need deeper than doctrine. They reminded people that time itself was sacred, that endings and beginnings were not enemies but partners. To honor the dead was to reaffirm the beauty of the living. Every fire lit, every loaf shared, every story told became part of the same unbroken chain of gratitude. You step away from the square toward the path that leads up the hill. From there you can see the entire valley, the glint of the river, the dark lines of the heroes, the smoke rising from distant cottages. The landscape looks almost timeless, as though the years have folded into one. You think of all those who walked this same path before you, their footsteps long erased, yet somehow still felt. A soft wind moves through the grass. It carries the faint smell of bread and wood smoke, the same scents that filled the air last night. The horizon brightens. The sun at last breaks free from the clouds flooding the land with pale gold. For a moment, everything glows, the roofs, the river, even the frost on the stones. The world feels renewed. You close your eyes and listen. No bells, no chants, no whispers. Now only the steady rhythm of life beginning again. The fields will sleep through winter, the villages will work and wait, and the festival will return when the seasons turn once more. The same songs will be sung, the same candles lit, the same stories told beside the fire. Each repetition will keep the memory alive and you, standing in this quiet morning, understand what the people of these centuries knew instinctively, that every act of kindness is a form of remembrance and every remembrance is an act of hope. The dead are not gone. They are carried in every heartbeat, every shared loaf, every spark of light that refuses to die. The wind softens, the sunlight warms your face and the long night fades completely. The village breathes alive and peaceful. Somewhere a door opens and laughter spills out, like the first note of spring. The world, for now, is safe. Now the story slows like a candle burning low. You imagine yourself back in that quiet village, the fires reduced to gentle embers, the scent of wood and bread still hanging in the air. The people have gone to their work, their laughter, soft and distant, and only the sound of wind through the fields remains. Let your breathing fall into rhythm with that wind. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the same calm that filled the villagers' hearts begins to settle in you. You picture the frost melting from the roofs, drops of water sliding down to the earth below, small and steady, every sound feels soft, every movement unhurried. The stories of the night drift through your thoughts, the flickering fires, the soul cakes, the charms on the doors, the songs for the dead. They no longer feel eerie but gentle, like the rustle of leaves in a slow breeze. You realize they were never about ghosts or fear. They were about love carried across centuries by voices that refused to go silent. You imagine lying beneath a thick blanket, the warmth of the hearth fading slowly to a glow. Outside, the stars shimmer above the quiet fields. Somewhere far away, a bell tolls. One last time. You do not need to move or think or hold on to anything. Everything has already been cared for. The night, like every story, ends in peace. The fires have dimmed, but their warmth lingers in the soil, in memory, in you. Let the quiet gather around you now, deep and steady. The world is safe, the year has turned and morning waits with open arms. Sweet dreams.